Some sounds are meant to exist, and when they disappear, the world notices. The Portage Valley stretches 25 miles southeast of Anchorage, carved deep into the Chugach Mountains by the Portage Glacier during the last ice age. For thousands of years, the glacier dominated this valley, its terminus reaching nearly to the Seward Highway. But by the 1980s, climate change had pulled the ice back more than a mile from the road, leaving behind Portage Lake and a landscape that seemed to echo with absence. The Chugach National Forest encompasses 5.4 million acres of wilderness, making it the second largest national forest in the United States. Within its boundaries, Portage Glacier serves as both a tourist destination and a research site. The Alaska Climate Research Center has maintained monitoring equipment in the valley since 1973, tracking temperature, precipitation, and seismic activity as the glacier retreats. The valley itself carries an unusual acoustic signature. Sound travels differently here than in most mountain environments. The steep valley walls, composed primarily of slate and greywacke, create natural amplification chambers. A conversation at normal volume near the lake can be heard clearly from half a mile away. Tour guides routinely demonstrate this phenomenon by clapping their hands and counting the seconds until the echo returns from the glacier face. Local indigenous peoples, primarily the Dena'ina, avoided the valley during certain seasons, though their oral traditions offer conflicting explanations. Some stories describe the glacier as a place where spirits gathered to speak in voices too low for human ears. Others suggest the ice itself listened to conversations and remembered them. What remains consistent across these accounts is a recognition that sound behaved strangely in Portage Valley long before scientists arrived to measure it. The incident began on July 9, 1987, when Dr. Margaret Chen and her 4-person research team arrived to conduct a routine glacial mass balance study. Chen, a glaciologist from the University of Alaska Fairbanks, had worked in the valley 6 times over the previous decade. Her team included 2 graduate students, a photographer documenting ice loss, and a technician responsible for maintaining seismic monitoring equipment. They established base camp near the lake's eastern shore, approximately 2 miles from the glacier's current terminus. The morning of July 10th proceeded normally. Team members collected ice core samples, measured glacier movement using GPS coordinates, and documented the rate of calving at the ice face. Their equipment functioned properly, including sensitive acoustic monitoring devices designed to detect the low-frequency rumbles that precede major ice movements. At 11:47 a.m. on July 10th, according to multiple synchronized timepieces, all recorded sound in the valley ceased. The silence was not gradual. Chen's field notes, written in careful block letters, record the moment. Sound stopped. Complete. Instantaneous. Like someone turned off the world's volume. Her digital audio equipment, calibrated that morning, showed readings of 0 decibels across all frequencies. The wind continued to blow, visible in the movement of grass and the surface of the lake, but produced no sound. Water continued to flow from the glacier into the lake, creating ripples and splash patterns, but in absolute silence. Team photographer David Reeves continued taking pictures throughout the event, creating a visual record of apparently normal activity occurring without sound. His photographs show ice calving from the glacier face, chunks weighing several tons crashing into the lake and sending up massive sprays of water. In normal conditions, these events produce sounds audible from miles away, described by witnesses as resembling thunder or artillery fire. Graduate student Lisa Park attempted to create sound by shouting, clapping, and striking rocks together. Her actions produced no audible result, though she reported feeling vibrations through the ground and air pressure changes that suggested sound waves were being generated but somehow prevented from reaching human ears. Her portable radio received stations from Anchorage clearly, indicating that electromagnetic waves continued to propagate normally through the valley. The team's seismic equipment continued to function, recording ground vibrations from ice movement, footsteps, and falling rocks. This data proved that sound-generating events were occurring and that the instruments were working properly. The disconnect existed specifically between sound generation and auditory perception. On the second day of silence, Dr. Chen attempted to contact the Alaska Climate Research Center via radio. Her transmission was received normally, and responses from Anchorage came through clearly on her equipment. However, the transmitted voices produced no audible sound in the valley. Chen's team could read transcripts of incoming messages on their radio's display screen, but heard nothing through the speakers or headphones. Dr. Elizabeth Morse, Chen's supervisor at the university, later described receiving a telephone call from Chen on July 11th. She was speaking normally, but she kept asking if I could hear her properly. She said she couldn't hear her own voice, couldn't hear anything at all, but the phone seemed to be working. I could hear her perfectly fine. She sounded calm, but there was something unsettling about the conversation. She kept pausing, as if she was listening for something that never came. The silence persisted for exactly 72 hours, ending as abruptly as it had begun. At 11:47 a.m. on July 13th, normal sound returned to the valley. Chen's audio equipment recorded the moment, a sudden wave of accumulated noise as wind, water, ice movement, and bird calls resumed simultaneously. The team members described the experience as overwhelming, like stepping from a soundproof room into a busy city street. Chen submitted her preliminary report to the Alaska Climate Research Center on July 20th, 1987. The report included audio recordings, seismic data, photographs, and detailed written accounts from all team members. Within 48 hours of its submission, the report was classified under National Weather Service security protocols and removed from university files. Dr. Morse retained copies of some field notes and attempted to follow up on the incident through official channels. I submitted inquiry after inquiry, asking for clarification about why a glaciology report would be classified. The standard response was that the research involved sensitive environmental monitoring data related to national security interests. I was told that further questions should be directed to the Department of Defense, which never responded to my letters. The Alaska Climate Research Center continued its regular monitoring of Portage Glacier, but no subsequent research teams were assigned to study acoustic phenomena in the valley. Equipment manifests from 1988 onward show that sensitive audio recording devices were removed from the standard glaciology equipment package for Portage Valley research. Park, the graduate student who had attempted to create sound during the silence, transferred to a different research program 6 months after the incident. In a 1992 interview with the Anchorage Daily News about glacier research, she briefly mentioned the Portage Valley work. There are some places where normal rules don't apply. You learn to focus on the data you can collect and accept that some questions don't have answers you're allowed to pursue. Reeves, the photographer, continued documenting glacier research throughout Alaska, but never returned to Portage Valley. His photographs from July 1987 were included in Chen's classified report and are not available in his published portfolio of Alaska wilderness photography. The National Weather Service maintains that no unusual atmospheric conditions were recorded in the Portage Valley area during July 1987. Temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, and wind speed measurements from nearby monitoring stations show normal summer weather patterns for the region. Local tourist guides working in the valley during the summer of 1987 have no memory of unusual quiet periods. However, several guides independently reported that tour groups during that week seemed unusually subdued and complained more frequently about headaches and disorientation than was typical for glacier visits. Chen completed her doctorate in glaciology in 1989 and accepted a position with the National Science Foundation's Antarctic Research Program. She has not published research about acoustic phenomena in glacial environments and did not respond to interview requests for this account. The Portage Valley continues to attract thousands of visitors each year. The glacier has retreated another half-mile since 1987, and the lake has grown correspondingly larger. Tour guides still demonstrate the valley's acoustic properties by creating echoes off the surrounding mountains, and visitors routinely comment on how clearly sound carries in the thin mountain air. But sometimes, on still summer mornings when the wind dies down and the tour buses have not yet arrived, Park rangers report brief moments when the valley seems too quiet, when the absence of expected sounds creates a subtle unease that makes them check their radios and listen more carefully for sounds that should be there but are not. The classified report from July 1987 remains in National Weather Service archives, its contents unknown to the scientific community that might benefit from understanding what happened when an entire valley lost its voice for 3 days, and why no one in authority wanted that silence to be explained. Sometimes the Earth refuses to be where instruments insist it should be. The north slope of Alaska stretches 400 miles east to west along the Arctic Ocean, a vast expanse of tundra that holds one of the largest oil reserves in North America. Prudhoe Bay, discovered in 1968, transformed this remote wilderness into an industrial complex of drilling platforms, processing facilities, and support infrastructure. The region operates under extreme conditions. Winter temperatures reach 60 degrees below zero, and during summer, the sun never sets for 65 consecutive days. Oil exploration in the Arctic requires precision surveying that accounts for magnetic declination, permafrost movement, and the challenges of working near the magnetic North Pole. Survey teams use a combination of GPS satellites, ground-based radio beacons, and traditional surveying equipment to establish drilling coordinates. The margin for error in these measurements is typically less than 3 feet, critical when drilling operations can cost millions of dollars and environmental regulations require exact compliance with permitted locations. The Prudhoe Bay field encompasses over 200,000 acres of leased territory, divided into sections managed by multiple oil companies. Survey work is contracted to specialized firms that maintain detailed records of all coordinate measurements, cross-referenced with geological surveys, environmental impact studies, and federal lease boundaries. These records are subject to regular audits by the Bureau of Land Management and the Alaska Department of Natural Resources. The terrain itself presents unique challenges. The tundra appears uniform from a distance, but subtle variations in elevation, drainage patterns, and permafrost depth create a complex landscape that changes seasonally. During summer thaw, the active layer of soil above the permafrost becomes unstable, shifting the position of survey markers and requiring constant remeasurement of established coordinates. The first documented anomaly occurred on August 14, 1977, when Peterson Geosurveying recorded coordinates 70 degrees 19 minutes, 42.78 seconds north latitude, and 148 degrees 37 minutes, 15.34 seconds west longitude. The coordinates indicated a proposed drilling site approximately 12 miles southeast of the main Prudhoe Bay facility, in an area designated for exploratory drilling by Atlantic Richfield Company. Survey team leader Robert Peterson, a 23-year veteran of Arctic surveying, recorded the coordinates using standard GPS equipment calibrated that morning against known reference points. His team of 4 surveyors independently verified the measurements using backup equipment. The coordinates appeared in Peterson's official report as the recommended location for exploratory well designation PR 7723. When the drilling crew arrived at the coordinates 3 weeks later, they found only undisturbed tundra. The GPS equipment on their vehicles confirmed they had reached the exact location specified in Peterson's survey. However, no survey markers, equipment caches, or evidence of previous human activity could be found. The coordinates led to a slight depression in the tundra, filled with standing water and showing no geological indicators that would justify drilling operations. Atlantic Richfield assumed a clerical error had occurred and requested a resurvey. On September 8, 1977, Morrison Survey Associates was contracted to verify the coordinates. Their team, led by surveyor Margaret Morrison, established the same coordinates using different equipment and following a different route to the location. Morrison's report noted, GPS readings confirmed at 70 degrees 19 minutes, 42.78 seconds north, 148 degrees 37 minutes, 15.34 seconds west. Location shows no evidence of previous survey activity or geological indicators supporting drilling operations. The coordinates appeared again in 1978 when Chugach Surveying, working for Exxon, recorded identical readings while conducting a comprehensive survey of adjacent lease areas. Team leader Frank Chugach noted in his field journal that his equipment had malfunctioned briefly while recording the coordinates, displaying readings that seemed too precise, like the GPS was locked onto something that wasn't supposed to be there. Between 1978 and 1982, 15 additional survey teams working for various oil companies and government agencies recorded the same coordinates. Each team used different equipment, followed different protocols, and was unaware of previous teams' reports. The coordinates appeared in surveys conducted during all seasons, under varying weather conditions, and using GPS technology from multiple manufacturers. Survey crews began reporting unusual psychological effects when working in the area around the coordinates. Peterson, who encountered the location 4 times between 1977 and 1980, described a persistent urge to abandon his equipment and walk north across the tundra. It wasn't fear exactly, more like a compulsion. I'd be standing there looking at my GPS, knowing the numbers were right, knowing the location was wrong, and I'd start thinking about just leaving everything and walking, not to anywhere specific, just north. Morrison reported similar experiences during her second encounter with the coordinates in 1979. My crew kept asking why we were staying so long at an empty site. I realized I'd been standing there for almost an hour, just staring at the GPS display. The numbers never changed, but somehow I kept expecting them to. One of my technicians started walking away from the equipment. When I called him back, he couldn't explain why he'd been walking or where he'd been planning to go. Chugach documented the most detailed account of the psychological effects in his 1980 field report. Equipment calibration normal. Coordinates verified by 3 independent GPS units. Location accuracy confirmed within standard tolerances. However, extended presence at coordinates results in crew disorientation and spontaneous abandonment of survey protocols. Recommend future surveys of this grid section be conducted remotely or avoided entirely. The Bureau of Land Management reviewed the repeated coordinate reports in 1981 as part of a comprehensive audit of North Slope surveying practices. The audit examined equipment calibration records, crew training documentation, and environmental factors that might affect GPS accuracy. BLM Inspector David Chen found no evidence of equipment malfunction, human error, or systematic bias that would explain the repeated occurrence of identical coordinates. Chen's report noted that the coordinates fell within a section of tundra that showed no unique geological features in aerial photography or satellite imagery. Ground-penetrating radar conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey found no subsurface anomalies, mineral deposits, or permafrost variations that would distinguish the location from surrounding terrain. The coordinates appeared to reference a location that was, in all measurable respects, identical to thousands of other points across the North Slope. The Alaska Department of Natural Resources flagged the coordinates as a recurring survey anomaly in 1982 and recommended that all future survey teams be briefed about the location to prevent continued documentation. The same non-existent drilling site. However, survey teams continued to record the coordinates without prior knowledge of the anomaly, suggesting that the briefing protocols were not consistently implemented. Oil companies operating in the Prudhoe Bay region began quietly sharing information about the coordinates through informal channels. Survey crews were advised to cross-check any readings that matched the known anomalous location and to expedite work in the surrounding area. Despite these precautions, survey teams continued to record the coordinates as late as 1985, though documentation becomes scarce after this date. The most disturbing account came from surveyor Lisa Park, who worked for 3 different survey companies between 1980 and 1984. Park encountered the coordinates 5 times during her career on the North Slope. The first time, I thought it was equipment failure. The second time, I thought it was coincidence. By the 5th time, I realized something was drawing our instruments to that spot. Not physically drawing them, but something about the location made our equipment want to record those numbers. Park described the location as aggressively ordinary, like it was trying too hard to be unremarkable. She noted that wildlife avoided the immediate area, though no environmental factors would explain this behavior. Her field notes from 1983 include sketches of the site from different angles, showing subtle variations in grass, height, and water pooling that she described as too regular, like someone had arranged the landscape to look natural. Government records related to the coordinate anomaly were classified in 1986 under Department of Energy Security protocols related to critical infrastructure protection. Survey companies were advised that continued documentation of the coordinates should be reported through specific channels rather than included in standard geological surveys. The coordinates have not appeared in publicly available survey reports since 1987, though veterans of North Slope surveying continue to reference the location in private conversations. Several retired surveyors have described feeling compelled to return to the area during visits to Alaska, though none have publicly documented whether the coordinates continue to appear on modern GPS equipment. Current maps of the Prudhoe Bay oil field show no special designation for the area around 70 degrees, 19 minutes, 42.78 seconds north latitude and 148 degrees, 37 minutes, 15.34 seconds west longitude. The location remains accessible to authorized personnel working in the oil field, appearing on satellite imagery as unremarkable tundra indistinguishable from the surrounding landscape. But somewhere in the archives of 17 different surveying companies, stored in boxes of field reports and equipment logs, identical coordinates appear in careful handwriting and precise digital readouts, pointing to a place that insists on being found but refuses to exist, where instruments record numbers that lead nowhere, and experienced surveyors feel an unexplained urge to abandon everything they know and walk into the endless Arctic night. Some days disappear so completely that even the people who live through them can't remember they happened. Dead Horse sits at the end of the world, 414 miles north of Fairbanks on Alaska's North Slope. Built in 1977 to support the Trans-Alaska Pipeline and Prudhoe Bay oil operations, the town exists solely as a logistics hub for one of the most remote industrial sites in North America. During winter, temperatures drop to 50 degrees below zero, and the sun disappears for 67 days. During summer, the sun never sets, and the permafrost creates a landscape of standing water and mud that stretches to the horizon. The Dead Horse Airport serves as the primary gateway to the North Slope, handling cargo flights, personnel transport, and emergency medical evacuations. The facility operates under Federal Aviation Administration oversight with a control tower staffed 24 hours a day. 2 runways accommodate aircraft ranging from small charter planes to military cargo transports. Weather conditions often ground flights for days at a time, making accurate record-keeping essential for scheduling and safety coordination. The airport maintains detailed logs of all aircraft movements, fuel consumption, weather observations, and radio communications as required by federal regulations. These records are cross-referenced with flight plans filed through the FAA's automated system and verified against radar tracking data from stations in Fairbanks and Barrow. The system creates multiple redundant records that make it virtually impossible for aircraft operations to occur without documentation. Oil field workers depend on scheduled flights for crew rotations, medical emergencies, and supply deliveries. A typical day at Dead Horse Airport sees between 15 and 30 aircraft movements, with higher traffic during shift changes and supply runs. The remote location means that missed flights can strand workers for days or weeks, making reliable air service critical to oilfield operations. On March 14, 1991, Dead Horse Airport recorded normal operations with 23 aircraft arrivals and departures. Weather conditions were clear with light winds and visibility exceeding 10 miles. The airport's fuel trucks dispensed 4,200 gallons of jet fuel to various aircraft. Control Tower Supervisor Janet Miller noted in her shift report that communications were routine and all flights proceeded on schedule. March 16th showed similar activity levels with 21 aircraft movements, fuel consumption of 3,800 gallons, and standard radio traffic. Weather remained clear with temperatures around 20 degrees below zero. Controller Mike Chen documented normal operations throughout his shift, with all aircraft following standard approach and departure procedures. The anomaly exists in what should have been March 15th. Airport movement logs for that date show 0 aircraft arrivals and 0 departures. The official record indicates no radio communications with aircraft, no fuel dispensed, and no ground support activity. Weather observations were recorded normally every hour, showing clear skies and calm winds throughout the day. The control tower was staffed according to schedule, and all equipment functioned properly. However, fuel consumption records from the airport's main storage facility show that 3,600 gallons of jet fuel were dispensed on March 15th. The automated monitoring system recorded 17 separate fuel transactions throughout the day, consistent with normal aircraft servicing operations. Each transaction included aircraft identification codes, fuel quantities, and timestamps that aligned with typical traffic patterns. Security cameras positioned throughout the airport recorded 24 hours of footage on March 15th. The video shows empty runways, vacant passenger terminals, and no aircraft on the ground or in the air. Control tower personnel are visible at their stations, appearing to perform normal duties, including radio communications and equipment monitoring. However, no aircraft appear in any of the surveillance footage despite the documented fuel transactions. Radio communication logs present the most disturbing discrepancy. Transcripts from March 15th show routine exchanges between the control tower and 29 different aircraft throughout the day. Controllers issued landing clearances, taxi instructions, and departure authorizations following standard protocols. Pilots responded with normal acknowledgments and position reports. The conversations include specific details about wind conditions, runway assignments, and traffic advisories that match the weather observations and fuel records. Air traffic controller Sarah Peterson worked the afternoon shift on March 15th. Her radio logs show continuous communication with aircraft from noon until 8 p.m., including detailed exchanges about approach procedures and runway conditions. Peterson's handwritten notes from that day document aircraft call signs, altitudes, and estimated arrival times that correspond with the fuel dispensing records. However, Peterson has no memory of working on March 15th. "I know I was scheduled to work that day," Peterson said in a 1992 interview with Airport Management. "I have notes in my handwriting, and the radio logs show my voice talking to pilots, but I can't remember any of it. It's like I went to sleep on March 14th and woke up on March 16th. People keep telling me I was at work, acting normal, doing my job, but that day just isn't in my memory." Ground crew supervisor Tom Bradley reported similar memory gaps. His duty roster shows that he supervised fuel operations throughout March 15th, signing off on fuel deliveries and coordinating with aircraft crews. Security footage confirms his presence at the airport, showing him performing routine inspections and equipment checks. Bradley's written reports from that day detail aircraft tail numbers, fuel quantities, and crew interactions that align with other documentation. "I wrote those reports," Bradley said. "That's my handwriting, my signature. The security cameras show me doing my job, but I have absolutely no recollection of that day." My crew says the same thing. "We all showed up for work, we all did our jobs, but none of us remember doing it. We call it the quiet shift, because that's how it feels when we try to think about it. Just quiet." The Federal Aviation Administration launched an investigation into the documentation discrepancies in April 1991. Investigators examined fuel records, radio equipment, security systems, and interviewed all personnel who were scheduled to work on March 15th. The investigation found no evidence of equipment malfunction, record tampering, or human error that would explain the conflicting documentation. FAA Inspector Robert Chen reviewed the radio transcripts and compared voice patterns with recordings from other dates. "The conversations sound completely normal," Chen reported. Standard phraseology, appropriate responses, typical pilot-controller interactions. The voices match the controllers who were on duty. But when we played the recordings for the controllers, they didn't recognize their own voices or remember having those conversations. The investigation expanded to include aircraft operators and pilots who were reportedly in communication with Deadhorse on March 15th. Flight records from airlines and charter companies showed no scheduled flights to or from Deadhorse on that date. Pilots whose voices appeared on radio transcripts had no record of flying to the North Slope in March 1991. Aircraft tail numbers documented in fuel records belonged to planes that were confirmed to be at other airports on March 15th. The Alaska Department of Transportation reviewed radar data from tracking stations that monitor North Slope airspace. Radar records from March 15th show no aircraft activity in the Deadhorse area, consistent with the visual evidence from security cameras. However, radio direction-finding equipment detected transmission sources consistent with aircraft positions that would require air traffic control coordination. Medical examinations of airport personnel found no evidence of drug exposure, psychological manipulation, or collective memory disorders. Blood tests conducted weeks after the incident showed normal results for all staff members. Psychological evaluations revealed mild anxiety related to the memory gaps, but no indication of mental health issues that would explain the phenomena. The FAA classified its investigation report in November 1991, citing concerns about aviation security and operational procedures. Airport personnel were advised not to discuss the incident with media or outside investigators. The official explanation referenced a computer system malfunction that created false records, though technical documentation of the supposed malfunction was never released. Deadhorse Airport continued normal operations after March 15th, with no recurrence of the documentation anomalies. However, several staff members transferred to other facilities within 6 months of the incident. Those who remained reported occasional discomfort when working alone during quiet periods, describing an unexplained feeling that they were communicating with aircraft they couldn't see. The fuel that was allegedly dispensed on March 15th was never accounted for in subsequent audits. Storage levels showed the expected decrease despite no documented aircraft servicing. The missing fuel was written off as a measurement error, though the automated monitoring system had never recorded similar discrepancies before or after the incident. Current airport operations at Deadhorse follow enhanced documentation procedures implemented after the 1991 incident. Multiple independent systems verify aircraft movements, and all radio communications are recorded with backup systems. Staff members are required to maintain detailed written logs that are cross-referenced with electronic records and security footage. But sometimes, during the long Arctic winters, when weather grounds all flights for days at a time, control tower personnel report brief moments when their radios crackle with familiar voices requesting clearance to land at an empty airport, where fuel trucks stand ready to service aircraft that exist only in carefully documented conversations between controllers who cannot remember the day they guided invisible planes through empty skies. The air changes so abruptly that drivers often pull over to check if their vehicle's heating system has failed. The Dalton Highway stretches 414 miles from Fairbanks to Deadhorse, Alaska, following the Trans-Alaska Pipeline through some of the most remote wilderness in North America. Built in 1974 to support pipeline construction, the highway crosses 3 mountain ranges, hundreds of rivers, and transitions from boreal forest to Arctic tundra. Truckers call it the Haul Road, and it remains one of the most dangerous highways in the world, with temperatures that can drop to 70 degrees below zero and winds that flip 18-wheelers off the roadway. Mile marker 175 sits in the Brooks Range foothills, approximately 200 miles north of Fairbanks. The terrain here consists of rolling hills covered in sparse vegetation, with patches of exposed permafrost and small lakes that freeze solid during winter. The area receives minimal precipitation and experiences extreme temperature variations between summer and winter, with recorded differences of over 100 degrees Fahrenheit between seasonal highs and lows. Weather monitoring along the Dalton Highway is critical for transportation safety and pipeline operations. The Alaska Department of Transportation maintains automated weather stations every 50 miles, recording temperature, wind speed, humidity, and visibility data that helps determine road conditions and travel advisories. The pipeline company operates additional monitoring equipment to track temperature changes that could affect oil flow and pump station operations. The highway passes through traditional hunting grounds of the Gwich'in people, who have traveled these valleys for thousands of years. Oral traditions describe certain areas where the cold lives in summer and warn against camping in locations where the air behaves strangely. Elders speak of invisible boundaries that separate warm and cold air, though these stories were generally dismissed by modern meteorologists as folklore based on localized wind patterns or elevation changes. The temperature anomaly was first documented on June 15, 1983, by Alaska Department of Transportation maintenance worker Carl Peterson. Peterson was conducting routine road surface temperature measurements as part of summer maintenance planning when his digital thermometer recorded an abrupt temperature change near mile marker 175. His equipment showed a reading of 68 degrees Fahrenheit on the south side of a small rise in the roadway, then 45 degrees on the north side, measured less than 10 feet apart. Peterson initially assumed his equipment had malfunctioned and returned to Fairbanks for calibration. When he repeated the measurements 3 days later with different equipment, the results were identical. The temperature differential remained exactly 23 degrees, measured at the same location on the highway. Peterson documented the anomaly in his maintenance report, noting that the temperature change occurred within 3 normal walking steps along the road surface. The Department of Transportation dispatched a team of technicians to verify Peterson's measurements in July 1983. Using calibrated digital thermometers, infrared temperature guns, and atmospheric monitoring equipment, the team confirmed a precise temperature boundary that extended across the highway and approximately 50 feet to either side. The temperature dropped exactly 23 degrees when crossing from south to north, regardless of ambient conditions, time of day, or season. Weather Service meteorologist Dr. Sarah Chen conducted the first comprehensive study of the phenomenon in August 1983. Chen's team deployed multiple temperature sensors along a grid pattern centered on mile marker 175, recording data continuously for 48 hours. The measurements revealed a linear boundary where temperature changed abruptly across a distance of less than 6 feet, with the differential remaining constant despite fluctuations in overall atmospheric temperature. It defies everything we understand about atmospheric physics, Chen reported in her preliminary findings. Temperature gradients this sharp simply don't occur in nature without a clear heat source or geographic barrier. We're looking at a boundary that maintains mathematical precision under conditions that should cause it to dissipate within minutes. The air masses on either side of the line show identical humidity, pressure, and wind patterns, yet they maintain a constant temperature difference. Truckers who regularly travel the Dalton Highway began reporting the temperature change in the mid-1980s, describing the sensation as driving into a freezer even during summer months. Many drivers learned to anticipate the change and would alert passengers before crossing mile marker 175. Some truckers reported that their vehicle's thermostats would register the temperature drop within seconds of crossing the boundary. Robert McNeil, a veteran driver with 15 years of experience on the Dalton Highway, described his first encounter with the temperature line in 1985. I was hauling supplies to Prudhoe in July. Middle of summer, warm day. I'm driving along and suddenly it's like someone turned on the air conditioning. My thermometer dropped from 72 to 49 degrees in maybe 5 seconds. I thought something was wrong with my truck, but then I hit the same spot on the way back and the temperature jumped right back up. Pipeline maintenance crews working in the area confirmed the temperature differential affected their work schedules and safety protocols. Supervisor Janet Wilson noted in 1986 work reports that crews required different clothing when working on either side of mile marker 175, despite the locations being less than a quarter mile apart. We'd send guys out in summer gear on the south side of the marker, and they'd need winter jackets to work on the north side. Same day, same weather conditions, but they might as well be in different climate zones. The Alaska Climate Research Center began systematic monitoring of the temperature boundary in 1987, installing permanent weather stations on both sides of the anomaly. Dr. Michael Torres, the project director, documented temperature readings every 15 minutes for 3 years, creating a comprehensive database of atmospheric conditions at the site. The data confirmed that the 23-degree differential remained constant across all seasons, weather patterns, and times of day. Torres's research revealed additional anomalies in the atmospheric data. Wind patterns showed no disruption when crossing the temperature boundary, despite the dramatic difference in air density that should result from the temperature change. Humidity levels remained identical on both sides of the line, which contradicted standard meteorological principles about the relationship between temperature and moisture content. The air behaves as if it doesn't know it should be different temperatures, Torres noted in his 1989 research summary. We're measuring two distinct air masses with identical properties except for temperature, existing in immediate proximity without mixing or equilibrating. It's like someone drew an invisible line and told the atmosphere to ignore physics on either side of it. The National Weather Service reviewed Torres's findings and dispatched a team of atmospheric physicists to conduct independent measurements. In 1990, the federal team used satellite thermal imaging, atmospheric sounding equipment, and computer modeling to analyze the temperature anomaly. Their report, completed in 1991, confirmed the existence of the temperature boundary but offered no explanation for its persistence or precision. Attempts to map the exact boundaries of the temperature differential revealed that the phenomenon extended beyond the highway in both directions, following no recognizable geographic features. The boundary ran roughly east-west for approximately 400 feet, then terminated abruptly without any tapering or gradual change. North of the line, temperatures remained consistently 23 degrees cooler across an area of approximately 2 square miles before gradually returning to normal atmospheric conditions. The Federal Aviation Administration noted the temperature anomaly in flight planning documents for aircraft operating in the Brooks Range, as the temperature differential created localized air density changes that could affect small aircraft performance. Pilots reported turbulence when flying low over mile marker 175, though weather conditions appeared normal from higher altitudes. The University of Alaska's Atmospheric Physics Department established a research station at the site in 1992, conducting studies on atmospheric boundary layers, temperature inversion patterns, and localized climate phenomena. Graduate students working at the station documented consistent temperature readings across multiple years of research, but published papers focused on general atmospheric research rather than the specific anomaly at mile marker 175. Research funding for studies of the temperature line was discontinued in 1995 without explanation. The university's research station was closed and equipment was transferred to other projects. Academic papers referencing the temperature anomaly at mile marker 175 ceased publication after 1996, though informal discussions among meteorologists continued to reference the site as an unexplained atmospheric phenomenon. The Alaska Department of Transportation continues to maintain weather monitoring equipment near mile marker 175, though current data is classified under infrastructure security protocols and not available for public research. Truckers and travelers still report the temperature change, describing it as a reliable landmark along the otherwise monotonous stretch of highway through the Brooks Range foothills. Recent GPS mapping systems include temperature warnings for the mile marker 175 area, advising drivers to expect localized temperature variations, without providing specific details about the nature or magnitude of the change. Tourist guides mention the temperature line as a curiosity, but typically attribute it to unique Arctic weather patterns, rather than acknowledging the precision and persistence of the anomaly. But every few months, another driver pulls over just past mile marker 175, checking their thermometer and wondering why the air outside their vehicle feels like winter in the middle of summer, or why crossing an invisible line in the road requires them to reach for a jacket they didn't need 3 steps earlier, in a place where the atmosphere obeys rules that science has yet to understand. Sometimes the voices of the lost find their way home through frequencies that should carry nothing but silence. Nome sits on the southern shore of the Seward Peninsula, a remote outpost of 3,800 residents facing the Bering Sea. Founded during the gold rush of 1899, the town serves as a regional hub for northwestern Alaska, connected to the outside world primarily by air and sea. The Nome Airport handles emergency medical flights, cargo deliveries, and search and rescue operations across thousands of square miles of tundra, mountains, and coastal waters, where aircraft disappearances remain tragically common. The region's harsh weather creates some of the most dangerous flying conditions in North America. Sudden storms, ground blizzards, and fog banks can appear within minutes, trapping aircraft between mountain ranges or over the ice-covered Bering Sea. Radio communication becomes critical for survival, as pilots rely on ground stations to navigate through weather systems that can reduce visibility to zero. The Federal Aviation Administration maintains emergency radio monitoring around the clock, coordinating with the Coast Guard and Civil Air Patrol for search and rescue operations. Nome's isolation means that radio operators often serve as the last human contact for pilots in distress. The town's communication specialists are trained to gather crucial information quickly: aircraft identification, passenger count, fuel remaining, and precise coordinates. These details become essential for rescue teams working against time and weather to locate downed aircraft in one of the most unforgiving landscapes on Earth. The Seward Peninsula has claimed dozens of aircraft over the decades, from bush planes carrying mail and supplies to larger aircraft attempting emergency landings. Many wrecks are never found, lost in terrain so remote that search teams cannot reach potential crash sites before weather windows close. Families often wait years for closure, hoping that wreckage will eventually be discovered by hunters, miners, or other pilots flying over previously unsearched areas. The first anomalous transmission was recorded on November 7, 1995, when Nome radio operator Janet Peterson received a distress call at 3:27 a.m. The pilot identified his aircraft as a Cessna 185 with tail number November 743 Charlie Lima, reporting engine failure and requesting immediate assistance. He provided coordinates that placed him approximately 60 miles northeast of Nome, over the interior of the Seward Peninsula. Peterson logged the transmission according to standard emergency protocols, recording the aircraft identification, coordinates, passenger manifest of 4 people, and fuel status. The pilot's voice remained calm as he described his situation, providing regular position updates and maintaining radio contact for 18 minutes before the transmission ended abruptly. Peterson immediately contacted the Coast Guard and Civil Air Patrol to initiate search and rescue operations. Search teams reached the coordinates at first light, finding undisturbed tundra with no signs of aircraft wreckage, impact scars, or emergency signals. Aerial searches expanded the search area to cover possible navigation errors or aircraft drift during descent. Ground teams checked nearby lakes and valleys where a pilot might attempt an emergency landing. After 3 days of intensive searching, the operation was suspended, with no trace of the missing aircraft. Follow-up investigations revealed that no aircraft with tail number November 743 Charlie Lima was registered in Alaska or had filed flight plans for November 7th. The Federal Aviation Administration confirmed that the tail number belonged to a Cessna 185 that had crashed in 1987 near Bethel, Alaska, killing all 4 occupants. The aircraft had been destroyed in the crash and officially removed from the registry 8 years before Peterson received the distress call. Radio operator Michael Chen documented the second transmission on February 14, 1996. At 1:45 a.m., he received a mayday call from a pilot reporting mechanical problems in a Piper Cherokee. The pilot provided detailed coordinates passenger information, and weather observations that matched current conditions over the Seward Peninsula. Chen maintained radio contact for 22 minutes, guiding the pilot through emergency procedures and coordinating rescue resources. Search operations found no aircraft at the reported coordinates. Investigation revealed that the tail number belonged to a Piper Cherokee that had disappeared in 1991 with 3 people aboard. The wreckage was discovered 4 years later in a remote canyon, with evidence suggesting the aircraft had crashed during the winter of 1991. All 3 occupants had died on impact. Yet the voice on Chen's radio transmission matched the missing pilot's voice patterns when compared to recordings from flight training sessions. Over the following 8 years, Nome radio operators documented 63 similar transmissions. Each call reported aircraft in distress, provided specific coordinates and passenger information, and maintained communication for 10 to 30 minutes before ending without resolution. Search teams found no wreckage at any of the reported locations. Investigation consistently revealed that the aircraft tail numbers belonged to planes that had crashed years or decades earlier, often with the same number of passengers and flight characteristics described in the emergency transmissions. Peterson, who received 14 of the transmissions during her tenure as a radio operator, described the psychological impact of the calls. "You're trained to help people in emergencies, to gather information that could save lives." These pilots sounded completely normal, following standard emergency procedures, giving us everything we needed to find them. It wasn't until later that we'd learned the aircraft had been destroyed years ago. You start questioning whether you're really helping anyone, or just listening to echoes of old tragedies. Chen documented detailed observations about the quality and content of the transmissions in his incident reports. The radio clarity was always excellent, better than typical for aircraft at those distances. The pilots knew current weather conditions, used proper radio procedures, and responded appropriately to our questions. But when we analyzed the recordings later, there were subtle oddities. Sometimes they'd reference navigation aids that had been decommissioned or mention weather stations that were no longer operational. Family members of missing pilots began contacting Nome radio operators after word of the transmission spread through Alaska's aviation community. Margaret Willis, whose brother had died in a 1983 crash near Nome, listened to recordings from a 1998 transmission and identified her brother's voice. "That's definitely Jim talking," she said. "Same speech patterns, same way he'd describe technical problems. But Jim died 15 years ago. We found his plane. We buried him. How is his voice asking for help on a radio in 1998? The Federal Aviation Administration launched an investigation into the Nome transmissions in 1999, focusing on potential radio frequency interference, equipment malfunctions, or deliberate hoax transmissions. Technical analysis of the radio equipment found no defects or interference sources that could explain the anomalous signals. Voice analysis confirmed that the transmissions matched speech patterns and vocal characteristics of deceased pilots, but investigators could offer no explanation for how these recordings could be generated or transmitted. The Alaska State Troopers investigated the possibility that someone was creating hoax emergency transmissions, potentially using archived recordings or voice simulation technology. However, the transmissions included real-time weather information, current radio frequencies, and responses to questions from radio operators that would be impossible to pre-record. The investigation found no evidence of deliberate deception or technical manipulation of the radio signals. The Civil Air Patrol documented every search mission triggered by the Nome transmissions, creating a database of coordinates, search patterns, and findings. Colonel Sarah Torres, who coordinated many of the searches, noted that the reported coordinates consistently led to areas where aircraft crashes had occurred in previous decades. The coordinates were always precise, always in locations where we'd found wreckage from older accidents. It was like the transmissions were coming from the crash sites themselves, not from aircraft in flight. The National Transportation Safety Board reviewed the Nome transmission records as part of a broader study of aviation communication anomalies in Alaska. The board's 20-page report, completed in 2001, acknowledged the existence of the transmissions, but concluded that current technology and scientific understanding cannot provide a definitive explanation for the reported communication events. The report recommended continued monitoring, but offered no theories about the source or nature of the signals. Radio monitoring equipment was upgraded at Nome Airport in 2002 with digital recording systems and signal analysis capabilities designed to capture more detailed information about anomalous transmissions. The new equipment documented 5 additional transmissions between 2002 and 2003, including digital analysis that confirmed the signals originated from the coordinates provided by the pilots, despite search teams finding no aircraft at those locations. The last documented transmission occurred on October 19, 2003, when radio operator Lisa Park received a distress call from a pilot reporting weather-related navigation problems. The transmission lasted 26 minutes and included detailed descriptions of ice formation on the aircraft and deteriorating visibility conditions. Search teams found no aircraft, and investigation revealed that the tail number belonged to a plane that had crashed in 1978. After 2003, the anomalous transmissions ceased without explanation. Radio operators in Nome continued to monitor emergency frequencies, but no further distress calls were received from aircraft that had crashed in previous decades. The Federal Aviation Administration quietly closed its investigation file in 2005, citing insufficient evidence to determine the source of the transmissions. Current radio operators in Nome receive briefings about the historical transmission anomalies, but are advised to treat all emergency calls as legitimate until proven otherwise. The recording equipment installed in 2002 continues to operate, creating digital archives of all radio traffic in case the phenomena resume. However, families of missing pilots occasionally contact the airport, asking if anyone has heard their loved ones' voices calling for help across frequencies that should carry only the static of empty sky. Radio operator David Chen, who began working in Nome in 2006, describes the weight of knowing about the historical transmissions. Every time I get an emergency call now, there's a moment where I wonder if I'm talking to someone who's really in trouble, or if I'm hearing a voice from an old tragedy that somehow found its way back to us. Either way, you do your job. You try to help, but sometimes, late at night when the radio is quiet, you listen a little more carefully to the static, wondering what voices might be trying to come through. Some waters refuse to be as shallow as they appear, measuring depths that lead to places that cannot be reached. Skilac Lake stretches 15 miles through the heart of the Kenai Peninsula, formed by glacial activity during the last ice age. The lake sits within the Kenai National Wildlife Refuge, surrounded by dense spruce forests and accessed primarily by a gravel road that winds through some of Alaska's most pristine wilderness. Fed by the Skilac River and several smaller tributaries, the lake serves as critical habitat for salmon spawning and supports populations of lake trout, northern pike, and Arctic grayling that draw anglers from across Alaska. The lake's official depth measurements were established during comprehensive surveys conducted by the U.S. Geological Survey in 1973 and 1978. These studies used standard sonar equipment and depth measurement techniques to map the lake bottom, identifying the deepest point at 528 feet near the lake's center. The bathymetric data became the foundation for fish habitat studies, water quality monitoring, and recreational safety guidelines used by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game. Skilac Lake's ecosystem depends on the relationship between surface temperature, depth, and seasonal mixing patterns that distribute oxygen and nutrients throughout the water column. Understanding the lake's depth profile helps biologists predict fish behavior, plan stocking programs, and monitor the health of native species populations. Accurate depth measurements are essential for these studies, as even small errors can significantly impact biological and chemical assessments. The Kenai Peninsula's lakes were formed by massive glacial activity that carved deep valleys and left behind complex underwater topography. Some lakes in the region exceed 600 feet in depth, created by glacial scouring that removed bedrock and sediment over thousands of years. Ski Lac Lake's moderate depth and relatively uniform bottom contours made it an ideal location for fisheries research and a popular destination for recreational fishing. The anomaly was discovered on July 22, 1989, when Alaska Department of Fish and Game biologist Dr. Robert Chen was conducting routine fish population surveys. Chen's team was using sonar equipment to map fish distribution patterns and verify habitat conditions when their depth sounder recorded an unexpected reading near the lake's center. The digital display showed 2,847 feet, nearly 5 times the lake's documented maximum depth. Chen initially assumed the equipment had malfunctioned and recalibrated the sonar using known shallow areas of the lake. The depth sounder functioned normally in areas where the bottom was clearly visible, recording accurate measurements that matched previous surveys. However, when the boat returned to the same central location, the sonar again registered 2,847 feet of water depth. The team marked the location using GPS coordinates and repeated the measurement using backup sonar equipment. The secondary unit, manufactured by a different company and using different frequency settings, recorded an identical depth reading. Chen's field notes document multiple measurements taken from various positions around the anomalous location, all showing depths exceeding 2,000 feet in an area where the lake bottom should be less than 600 feet below the surface. Chen contacted the U.S. Geological Survey to report the discrepancy and request verification of the historical depth measurements. USGS hydrologist Dr. Margaret Torres reviewed the original survey data and confirmed that multiple surveys conducted between 1973 and 1988 had consistently recorded maximum depths of 528 feet in the area where Chen's sonar was detecting much greater depths. Torres dispatched a team to Ski Lac Lake on August 15, 1989, equipped with high-precision sonar equipment and underwater cameras. The USGS team's measurements confirmed Chen's findings, recording depths of 2,847 feet at the precise coordinates he had documented. Underwater camera systems, lowered to 500 feet, showed typical lake bottom sediment and rocky substrate, consistent with the expected depth measurements. However, when the cameras were lowered beyond 530 feet, they continued to descend without encountering the lake bottom. The cable extended to its maximum length of 800 feet, still showing open water on the camera feed. Sonar readings throughout this process consistently indicated that the lake bottom remained more than 2,000 feet below the camera's position. Professional diving instructor Michael Peterson, contracted by the Alaska Department of Fish and Game to investigate underwater conditions, made the first human attempt to verify the depth anomaly on September 3, 1989. Peterson, certified for deep technical diving, descended to a depth of 180 feet using standard scuba equipment. His dive logs record normal underwater conditions with good visibility and typical lake bottom features at the expected depth. Peterson attempted a second dive to greater depth using mixed gas breathing equipment designed for deep water exploration. At 250 feet, he encountered what he described as solid bottom, normal lake sediment, exactly where it should be, according to the original surveys. Peterson's depth gauge and underwater pressure readings confirmed he had reached the lake bottom at approximately 520 feet, consistent with historical measurements. The contradiction between sonar readings and physical verification created an unprecedented situation in aquatic surveying. Sonar equipment consistently detected water depth exceeding 2,000 feet, while divers and underwater cameras encountered solid lake bottom at the documented depth. The instruments appeared to be measuring water that existed according to acoustic signals but could not be physically accessed. Dr. Chen described the psychological impact of the conflicting data in his final report. We had multiple pieces of equipment telling us there was water where our divers were standing on solid ground. It challenges your faith in the tools we use to understand the natural world. Either our instruments are fundamentally flawed, or we're dealing with something that doesn't behave according to normal physical principles. The University of Alaska's Limnology Department reviewed the Ski Lac Lake data as part of a broader study of Alaska's lake systems. Dr. Sarah Wilson, who supervised graduate student research at Ski Lac Lake, noted that water temperature and chemical composition at depth matched predictions for a lake with a maximum depth of 528 feet. The water chemistry doesn't support the existence of additional depth, Wilson reported. Oxygen levels, temperature gradients, and chemical stratification all indicate a lake bottom at 530 feet, not 2,800 feet. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game commissioned an independent survey by a private hydrographic company in 1990. The commercial survey team used state-of-the-art multi-beam sonar systems designed for ocean depth mapping, equipment capable of detecting subtle variations in bottom topography and water column characteristics. Their report confirmed the presence of what appeared to be deep water in the lake's center, but noted that the sonar returns showed anomalous characteristics inconsistent with typical acoustic reflection patterns. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration analyzed the sonar data from Ski Lac Lake as part of a research project studying unusual acoustic phenomena in freshwater systems. NOAA acoustic specialist Dr. Robert Martinez noted that the sonar returns from the deep water area showed perfect acoustic characteristics for water of the indicated depth, with no evidence of false readings or equipment malfunction. However, the acoustic signature doesn't match any known underwater topography or geological features. Federal funding for continued research at Ski Lac Lake was discontinued in 1991 without official explanation. The Alaska Department of Fish and Game returned to using the original depth measurements for fisheries management, treating the sonar anomaly as an unexplained equipment phenomenon. Official lake maps continue to show a maximum depth of 528 feet, despite the documented sonar readings indicating much greater depth. The University of Alaska removed Ski Lac Lake from its list of approved research sites in 1992, citing inconsistent baseline data that could compromise research validity. Graduate students were advised to conduct limnology studies at other lakes where depth measurements could be reliably verified through multiple methods. Dr. Peterson, the diving instructor who had physically verified the lake bottom depth, transferred his business operations to lakes in other regions of Alaska in 1993. In his final dive log entry for Ski Lac Lake, he wrote, "There's something unsettling about diving in a lake where your instruments insist you're swimming above 2,000 feet of water while you're standing on solid ground. It makes you question whether you can trust anything your equipment tells you." Current recreational fishing guides working at Ski Lac Lake occasionally mention the depth discrepancy to clients, usually in the context of unusual sonar readings that occur in the lake's center. Most guides advise avoiding the area due to equipment interference rather than acknowledging the persistent measurement anomaly. Fish and game personnel continue to conduct routine surveys at Ski Lac Lake, but depth measurements are no longer included in standard monitoring protocols. But sometimes, when conditions are right and the lake is perfectly calm, fishing guides report that their sonar equipment still shows impossible depths in the center of Ski Lac Lake, measuring thousands of feet of water that somehow exists only in the electronic displays of instruments that insist on detecting depths that lead to nowhere. In a lake where divers can touch bottom, while their equipment suggests they're floating above an abyss that refuses to exist. Some roads exist more completely on paper than they ever did on the ground, yet people continue to drive them every day. The Tongass National Forest encompasses 16.8 million acres across southeastern Alaska, making it the largest national forest in the United States. Established in 1907, the forest stretches across the Alexander Archipelago and portions of the mainland, containing ancient temperate rainforests, glacier-carved fjords, and thousands of miles of coastline. The region receives over 100 inches of rainfall annually, creating dense forests of Sitka spruce, western hemlock, and western red cedar that can live for more than 1,000 years. Ketchikan, known as Alaska's first city, sits on Revillagigedo Island, surrounded by the Tongass National Forest. The community of 8,000 residents depends on tourism, fishing, and timber industries, with the forest providing recreational opportunities and economic resources. A network of Forest Service roads provides access to remote areas for timber management, wildlife research, and public recreation, though many roads are seasonal or require high-clearance vehicles due to challenging terrain and weather conditions. Forest Service road construction in southeastern Alaska faces unique challenges, including steep terrain, unstable soils, frequent precipitation, and environmental regulations protecting salmon habitat and old-growth forests. Road building requires extensive planning, environmental assessments, and ongoing maintenance to prevent erosion and stream contamination. The Forest Service maintains detailed records of all road construction, maintenance activities, and usage patterns, as required by federal oversight and environmental compliance protocols. The temperate rainforest environment creates conditions where roads can become impassable within months if not properly maintained. Heavy rainfall, root growth, and landslides can quickly reclaim roadways, requiring constant vigilance from maintenance crews. Many Forest Service roads in the Tongass have been abandoned due to maintenance costs or environmental concerns, though they typically remain on maps until formal closure procedures are completed. Road 7421st appeared on Forest Service maps in 1983 as a proposed timber access route extending 12 miles northeast from the Ward Lake Recreation Area near Ketchikan. The road was designed to provide access to timber sales in the Upper Ketchikan Creek watershed and connect with existing logging roads in the area. Environmental assessments completed in 1984 approved construction of the road with specific requirements for stream crossings, slope stabilization, and wildlife protection measures. Construction began in May 1985 under contract with Petersburg Construction Company. The project called for a single-lane gravel road with turnouts every half-mile, 3 bridge crossings over tributaries of Ketchikan Creek, and a scenic overlook at Mile 8, providing views of the surrounding mountains and Tongass Narrows. The contract specified completion within 18 months, with the road designed to handle loaded logging trucks and recreational vehicles. Forest Service construction supervisor Janet Peterson oversaw the road-building project from its inception. Peterson's daily reports document steady progress through the summer of 1985, with crews completing approximately 3 miles of roadway before encountering unexpected terrain difficulties. Her September 15th report noted that construction has reached a natural cliff face that was not identified in preliminary surveys, requiring design modifications and additional environmental review. The cliff face, composed of solid granite rising nearly vertical for over 200 feet, blocked any feasible route continuation without extensive blasting and engineering work that would exceed project budgets and environmental limitations. Petersburg Construction completed work on the accessible portion of the road and submitted final reports showing 3.2 miles of completed roadway ending at the cliff face. The company was paid for completed work, and the project was officially suspended pending geological surveys and route alternatives. However, Forest Service maps continued to show Road 7420 as a completed 12-mile route. Administrative records from 1986 onward include maintenance schedules, traffic surveys, and patrol reports covering the full length of the road. Annual budget allocations included funding for bridge maintenance, culvert cleaning, and surface grading along all 12 miles of Road 7420, despite the physical road ending at mile 3.2. Forest Service Ranger Michael Chen was assigned patrol duties for Road 7420 beginning in 1987. Chen's monthly reports describe routine inspections of the full 12-mile route, documenting bridge conditions, wildlife crossings, and scenic overlook maintenance. His July 19, 1987 report noted minor erosion damage at mile 7 requiring gravel replacement, and bear activity observed near the overlook at mile 8. Recommend posting warning signs. Chen submitted detailed patrol reports for Road 7420 for 6 years, without ever questioning why his observations extended beyond the physical end of the road. His reports include photographs of bridges, wildlife crossings, and scenic views that correspond to features shown on Forest Service maps but do not exist on the ground. When interviewed in 1994 about his patrol duties, Chen expressed confusion about the discrepancy. "I know I drove that road hundreds of times," Chen said. "I have clear memories of the bridge at mile 5, the overlook at mile 8, the sharp curves around mile 10. I took photographs, wrote detailed reports, recommended maintenance work, but when I went back with investigators, the road just ends at that cliff. I can't explain how I was patrolling a road that doesn't exist, but I have 6 years of documentation proving I was there." Forest Service mechanic Lisa Park maintained vehicles assigned to Road 7420 patrol duties between 1988 and 1992. Her maintenance records show consistent wear patterns on patrol vehicles consistent with 12-mile round trips over gravel roads. Odometer readings, tire wear, and scheduled maintenance intervals all corresponded with regular use of the full-length road as documented in patrol reports. The trucks showed exactly the wear you'd expect from driving rough Forest Service roads, Park explained. Transmission fluid, brake pads, suspension components all wearing at rates consistent with the mileage reported in patrol logs. "I never questioned why rangers were putting 12 miles on their odometers when the road only goes 3 miles. The maintenance records made sense for the reported usage." The U.S. Forest Service conducted an internal audit of Road 7420 in 1993, following budget discrepancies related to maintenance funding. The audit team found that annual maintenance costs for the road were consistent with a 12-mile gravel road, requiring regular bridge maintenance, culvert cleaning, and surface repairs. However, ground surveys confirmed that no road existed beyond mile 3.2, and no bridges or culverts had been constructed beyond the cliff face. Audit Supervisor Dr. Robert Torres documented the investigation process in his 1994 report. "We found a complete disconnect between documentation and physical reality. Maps, patrol reports, maintenance records, and budget allocations all indicated a functional 12-mile road that simply doesn't exist. Yet the documentation is internally consistent and appears to reflect genuine observations by experienced Forest Service personnel." The Forest Service commissioned an independent survey by Alaska Surveying Associates in 1994 to verify the physical extent of Road 7420. The survey team used GPS equipment and aerial photography to map the actual road location, confirming that construction ended at mile 3.2 at a granite cliff face. No evidence of road construction, bridge foundations, or grading work was found beyond the cliff. However, the survey team noted unusual GPS anomalies while working in the area beyond mile 3.2. Survey equipment occasionally registered coordinates consistent with road locations shown on Forest Service maps, despite the absence of any visible roadway. These GPS readings lasted only briefly and could not be consistently reproduced, leading surveyors to attribute them to atmospheric interference or equipment malfunction. The General Accounting Office investigated the Road 7420 discrepancies as part of a broader review of Forest Service infrastructure management in 1995. GAO investigators found that similar documentation anomalies existed for other roads in the Tongass National Forest, though none as extensively documented as Road 7420. The investigation report recommended improved oversight of infrastructure records and verification procedures for construction projects. Forest Service personnel files show that Rangers Chen and Peterson were transferred to other assignments in 1995 following the road investigation. Both received positive performance evaluations and career advancement, with no indication that their patrol reports for Road 7420 were considered problematic or inaccurate. Neither ranger requested transfers or expressed concerns about their previous assignments. Current Forest Service maps show Road 7420 as closed to vehicular traffic, with no reference to the 12-mile length indicated in earlier documentation. The road is now classified as a hiking trail, extending 3.2 miles to a scenic viewpoint at the cliff face. No maintenance activities are scheduled beyond the physical terminus, and patrol duties are limited to the accessible portion of the route. The administrative files for Road 7420 were transferred to federal archives in 1998, classified under infrastructure security protocols that restrict public access to detailed engineering and construction records. Forest Service personnel are advised that questions about historical road projects should be directed to regional headquarters, which typically respond that specific project details are not available for public review. But sometimes, when budget planning documents are being prepared or maintenance schedules are updated, Forest Service computers still generate reports showing Road 7420 as a 12-mile route requiring bridge inspections and scenic overlook maintenance, as if the database remembers a road that exists more completely in administrative memory than it ever did in the Tongass rainforest, where rangers once patrolled miles of roadway that led to bridges they could photograph but never find again. Some places pull compasses toward them with such precision that navigation becomes an act of faith rather than science. Prince William Sound encompasses 10,000 square miles of protected waters between the Kenai Peninsula and the Chugach Mountains in south-central Alaska. The Sound contains over 3,000 miles of coastline, 150 glaciers, and numerous islands that create one of the most complex marine environments in North America. Formed by tectonic activity and glacial carving over millions of years, the Sound serves as critical habitat for marine mammals, seabirds, and commercial fish species while supporting oil tanker traffic, commercial fishing, and recreational boating. Naked Island sits near the western entrance to Prince William Sound, a 7-mile-long forested island positioned between Knight Island and the mainland. The island rises to nearly 2,000 feet above sea level, covered in dense Sitka spruce and hemlock forests, typical of the region's temperate rainforest climate. Archaeological evidence indicates indigenous peoples used the island seasonally for hunting and fishing for over 4,000 years, though no permanent settlements were established due to the island's exposure to severe weather from the Gulf of Alaska. The waters around Naked Island present challenging navigation conditions, even under normal circumstances. Complex tidal currents, submerged rocks, and frequent fog create hazards for vessels of all sizes. The island's position at the confluence of major shipping lanes requires precise navigation, as commercial traffic must pass safely between the island and surrounding shallow areas, while maintaining appropriate separation from fishing vessels and recreational boats. Marine navigation in Prince William Sound relies heavily on compass bearings, GPS coordinates, and radar positioning due to frequent weather conditions that reduce visibility to near zero. Accurate compass readings are essential for safe passage through the Sound's complex geography, where small navigation errors can lead to groundings, collisions, or vessels becoming lost in fog banks that can persist for days. The magnetic declination in the region is well documented and accounted for in navigation charts used by commercial and recreational mariners. The first documented compass anomaly near Naked Island was recorded on September 14, 1978, when commercial fishing vessel Captain Robert Peterson noticed unusual behavior in his ship's magnetic compass while passing south of the island. Peterson's logbook entry noted that his compass consistently pointed toward Naked Island regardless of his vessel's heading, maintaining this orientation throughout a 2-hour transit around the island's southern perimeter. Peterson initially attributed the compass behavior to local magnetic interference, possibly from mineral deposits or underwater geological features. However, when he tested his backup compass and handheld navigation equipment, all magnetic instruments showed identical behavior, pointing toward the island's approximate center rather than magnetic north. Peterson's GPS equipment continued to function normally, providing accurate position fixes that allowed him to navigate safely despite the compass malfunction. The anomaly occurred during clear weather with excellent visibility, allowing Peterson to verify his position using visual landmarks and radar bearings. His navigation log shows a circular track around Naked Island's southern shore, with compass headings that remained constant while his actual course changed continuously. Peterson reported the incident to the Coast Guard as a potential navigation hazard, recommending investigation of possible magnetic interference sources. Coast Guard Marine Safety Inspector Janet Chen investigated Peterson's report in October 1978, conducting compass checks from various positions around Naked Island. Chen's findings confirmed that magnetic compasses consistently oriented toward the island's center from any location within approximately 2 nautical miles of the shoreline. The effect was strongest near the southern and western shores, where compass needles would swing rapidly to point toward the island when vessels approached the anomaly zone. Chen's investigation revealed that the compass anomaly created a perfect circular pattern around Naked Island, with magnetic instruments pointing radially inward from all positions along the perimeter. This pattern contradicted known magnetic field behavior, as Earth's magnetic field lines run roughly north-south in the region, with local variations caused by geological features typically creating irregular distortion patterns rather than precise geometric shapes. The Coast Guard equipped a survey vessel with multiple compass systems and electronic navigation equipment to conduct comprehensive testing around Naked Island in November 1978. The survey confirmed the circular compass pattern and documented additional navigation equipment malfunctions. Autopilot systems consistently attempted to steer toward the island's center, requiring manual override to maintain intended courses. Magnetic heading indicators showed vessels traveling in straight lines toward Naked Island, regardless of actual heading changes. Commercial fishing captain Michael Torres encountered the navigation anomaly during salmon season in 1979, describing the psychological impact of equipment that contradicted visual observations. My compass was telling me I was heading straight for the island, but I could see I was running parallel to the shore. All my magnetic instruments were lying to me, but they were all lying in the same way. You start questioning whether you can trust anything your equipment tells you. Torres reported that his crew became disoriented when working near Naked Island, even experienced fishermen who had worked Prince William Sound for decades. The guys kept asking why we were heading toward the island when we were obviously following the shoreline. Your eyes tell you one thing, your instruments tell you something completely different. It messes with your head, makes you doubt what you're seeing. Alaska Marine Pilot Association members began noting the Naked Island compass anomaly in their unofficial navigation briefings by 1980. Pilots responsible for guiding large vessels through Prince William Sound developed procedures for dealing with compass malfunctions near the island, relying primarily on GPS and radar navigation while ignoring magnetic compass readings in the affected area. Senior pilot Lisa Park documented her experiences with the anomaly in internal association reports. Every ship I've piloted past Naked Island shows the same compass behavior. Doesn't matter if it's a small fishing boat or a massive oil tanker, the magnetic instruments all point toward the island. We've learned to warn bridge crews in advance, but it's still unsettling when million-dollar navigation systems start behaving like children's toys. The U.S. Geological Survey investigated potential geological causes of the magnetic anomaly in 1981, conducting aerial magnetic surveys and marine geological assessments around Naked Island. The surveys found no unusual mineral concentrations, magnetic rock formations, or subsurface geological features that would explain the compass behavior. Core samples from the island and surrounding seafloor showed typical composition for the region, with no magnetic anomalies detectable in laboratory analysis. USGS geophysicist Dr. Robert Chen noted that the magnetic readings around Naked Island contradicted fundamental principles of magnetic field behavior. Magnetic fields don't create perfect circular patterns in nature. You might see localized distortions from iron ore deposits or volcanic activity, but not geometric precision that extends uniformly around an entire island. The readings suggest an artificial magnetic source, but we found no evidence of any human-made installations or equipment. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration reviewed the Naked Island anomaly as part of a comprehensive study of magnetic declination variations in Alaska waters. NOAA's 1983 report acknowledged the navigation hazard but offered no explanation for the compass behavior, recommending that mariners rely on electronic navigation systems when operating near the island. Marine electronics technician David Peterson, who serviced navigation equipment for commercial vessels operating in Prince William Sound, documented consistent equipment behavior patterns associated with the Naked Island anomaly. Ships would come in reporting compass malfunctions after working near Naked Island. Every time, the compasses would test perfectly normal in the shop, but when they went back to the same area, the instruments would start pointing toward the island again. It's like the island has some kind of magnetic personality that overrides normal compass function. The Coast Guard's Marine Safety Office in Valdez quietly issued internal guidance to its patrol vessels regarding navigation procedures near Naked Island in 1984. The guidance advised Coast Guard personnel to verify compass readings with GPS coordinates and radar bearings when operating in the affected area, but no public navigation warnings were issued despite documented evidence of equipment malfunctions affecting commercial and recreational vessels. Coast Guard Marine Safety Specialist Sarah Wilson noted that the decision to avoid public warnings was based on concerns about potential impacts on commercial shipping. Naked Island sits in a major shipping lane for oil tankers and cargo vessels. If we issued formal navigation warnings about compass malfunctions, it could create liability issues and operational complications for commercial traffic. The GPS systems work fine, so vessels can navigate safely if they know to ignore their magnetic compasses. Academic research into the Naked Island magnetic anomaly ceased after 1985, when federal funding for geomagnetic studies in Alaska was redirected to other priorities. The University of Alaska's Geophysics Department removed Naked Island from its list of approved research sites, citing insufficient research value to justify continued investigation costs. Graduate students were advised to focus their studies on magnetic phenomena in other regions where results would be more readily explainable and publishable. Current marine navigation charts include a small notation near Naked Island indicating magnetic disturbances reported, though the notation provides no details about the nature or extent of the compass anomalies. GPS technology has largely eliminated the practical navigation problems caused by the magnetic effects, allowing vessels to operate safely in the area without relying on magnetic compass readings. However, recreational boaters and fishing guides still encounter the compass anomaly regularly, often discovering the effect only when their magnetic instruments suddenly swing toward Naked Island during routine navigation. Many guides now use the phenomenon as a curiosity to demonstrate to clients, though few can explain why their compasses seem to believe that magnetic north lies somewhere in the forests of an island that pulls every needle toward its heart with mathematical precision that defies the invisible forces that normally guide travelers across the water. Time moves differently in some places, and the most precise instruments humanity has built agree that Barrow, Alaska, is one of them. Barrow, now officially known as Utqiagvik, sits at 71 degrees north latitude on the shores of the Arctic Ocean, making it the northernmost city in the United States, home to approximately 4,500 residents, primarily Inupiaq people whose ancestors have lived in the region for over 1,000 years. The community exists in one of Earth's most extreme environments. During winter, the sun disappears for 65 consecutive days, while summer brings 65 days of continuous daylight, creating seasonal rhythms unlike anywhere else in North America. The town serves as the administrative center for the North Slope Borough, the largest municipality in the United States by area, encompassing 88,000 square miles of Arctic tundra. Barrow's economy depends primarily on government services, education, and support for oil operations at Prudhoe Bay. The community maintains critical infrastructure, including an airport, hospital, schools, and research facilities that support both local residents and scientific research across the Arctic region. Accurate timekeeping is essential for Barrow's operations, particularly for coordinating flights, medical emergencies, and communication with the outside world. The town's isolation means that scheduled services operate on precise timetables, as missed connections can strand people for days or weeks depending on weather conditions. Radio communications, satellite internet, and GPS navigation all depend on synchronized timing systems that must maintain accuracy within fractions of a second. The extreme latitude creates unique challenges for time synchronization systems. GPS satellites operate in orbits optimized for lower latitudes, resulting in reduced signal quality and potential timing errors at Arctic locations. Additionally, electromagnetic phenomena, including aurora activity, can interfere with satellite signals, making reliable timekeeping more complex than in temperate regions. The timing anomaly was first documented on March 23, 1994, when National Weather Service technician Dr. Margaret Chen installed atomic clock equipment at the Barrow Weather Station as part of a nationwide timing accuracy upgrade. The cesium atomic clock, synchronized to GPS satellites and calibrated to National Institute of Standards and Technology specifications, immediately began running 4.7 seconds slow compared to Coordinated Universal Time. Chen assumed the timing error resulted from GPS signal degradation common at high latitudes and recalibrated the system multiple times using different satellite configurations. However, the atomic clock continued to lag behind standard time by exactly 4.7 seconds, maintaining this offset with remarkable consistency, despite repeated synchronization attempts. Chen's installation report noted the timing discrepancy, but attributed it to atmospheric interference and satellite geometry limitations at Arctic latitudes. The National Institute of Standards and Technology dispatched timing specialist Dr. Robert Torres to investigate the Barrow clock anomaly in June 1994. Torres brought portable atomic clocks calibrated at NIST headquarters in Boulder, Colorado, equipment known to maintain accuracy within nanoseconds over extended periods. When operated within Barrow city limits, the portable clocks immediately began running slow, matching the behavior of the permanently installed equipment. Torres conducted systematic tests, moving the atomic clocks to various locations around Barrow and documenting timing accuracy at each position. The clocks maintained perfect synchronization with universal time when operated at the airport, which sits approximately 5 miles outside the city proper. However, when moved into the residential and commercial areas of Barrow, the same equipment consistently ran 4.7 seconds slow. The boundary between normal and altered time proved remarkably precise. Torres documented that atomic clocks would begin running slow within 50 feet of crossing Barrow's municipal boundary, as defined by city limits established in 1971. The timing change occurred gradually over approximately 10 minutes, suggesting the effect built up as equipment remained within the affected area rather than causing instantaneous time dilation. Local residents showed no awareness of the timing differential, though many described subtle differences in their perception of time when traveling between Barrow and other locations. Sarah Peterson, a teacher who had lived in Barrow for 15 years, noted that visits to Anchorage always felt rushed and stressful. People in Anchorage seemed to move faster, talk faster, like everyone's in a hurry all the time. When I come back to Barrow, everything feels more relaxed, more natural. I always assumed it was just the difference between small town and city life. Pilot Michael Chen, who flew regular routes between Barrow and Fairbanks, reported similar observations about passenger behavior and his own sense of time during layovers. Passengers boarding in Barrow always seem calmer, less concerned about departure times. They'll arrive for flights with plenty of time to spare, not rushing like passengers at other airports. I noticed I felt the same way when I had overnight stays in Barrow. Time just doesn't feel as pressing there. Hospital administrator Janet Wilson documented subtle patterns in patient behavior that correlated with the timing anomaly, though she was unaware of the atomic clock findings at the time. Patients in Barrow seem more patient, if you'll excuse the expression. They're willing to wait longer for appointments, less anxious about treatment schedules. Medical procedures seem to take longer here, but patients don't complain about the pace. It's like everyone has more time. The National Institute of Standards and Technology expanded its investigation of the Barrow time differential in 1995, installing permanent monitoring equipment and conducting monthly calibration checks. Dr. Elizabeth Morse supervised the extended study, documenting timing variations across different seasons, weather conditions, and solar activity levels. The 4.7-second differential remained constant regardless of environmental factors. Morse's research revealed that the timing anomaly affected all atomic clock technologies equally, including cesium, rubidium, and hydrogen maser systems. The consistency across different atomic clock principles ruled out equipment-specific malfunctions or calibration errors. GPS signal analysis showed normal satellite visibility and signal strength within Barrow, eliminating atmospheric interference as a potential cause. The investigation expanded to include analysis of other precision timing systems within Barrow city limits. Radio station transmitters, computer networks, and digital communication equipment all showed timing delays consistent with the atomic clock measurements. However, these systems typically synchronize to external time sources, making it difficult to determine whether the delays originated locally or from reference sources outside Barrow. The Federal Communications Commission reviewed radio frequency allocations and transmission timing for stations operating from Barrow in 1996. The review found that Barrow radio stations required constant adjustment to maintain synchronization with broadcast networks, consistently lagging behind network timing by several seconds. Station engineers attributed the timing drift to equipment aging and Arctic operating conditions. The U.S. Geological Survey investigated potential geological causes of the timing anomaly, conducting subsurface surveys and gravitational measurements around Barrow. The studies found no unusual mineral deposits, gravitational anomalies, or geological features that might affect atomic clock operation. Ground-penetrating radar revealed typical permafrost and sediment layers, with no indication of subsurface structures or materials that could influence precision timing equipment. The National Science Foundation established a research grant program to study Arctic timekeeping anomalies in 1997, though Barrow was not specifically mentioned in grant announcements. Several universities submitted proposals to investigate timing accuracy at high latitudes, but funding was discontinued after 1 year without explanation. Academic researchers were advised that Arctic timing studies had been transferred to classified defense research programs. The Department of Defense classified all research related to timing anomalies at Arctic locations in 1998 under national security protocols related to GPS accuracy and navigation systems. The National Institute of Standards and Technology was instructed to discontinue public reporting of timing research at locations above 60 degrees north latitude. Academic institutions were advised that continued research on Arctic timing phenomena required security clearances and Defense Department oversight. Dr. Torres, who had conducted the original Barrow investigation, transferred to a private sector position in 1999 after his research clearance was revoked. In his final NIST report, he noted that timing anomalies at Arctic locations present significant implications for navigation, communication, and scientific research that require continued investigation through appropriate channels. Torres declined interview requests about his Barrow research, citing ongoing security classifications. Current atomic clock installations in Barrow operate under modified calibration procedures that account for the documented timing differential. Equipment operators are trained to expect 4.7-second delays when synchronizing with external time sources, though official documentation describes this as atmospheric correction factors for high-latitude operations. The timing offset has remained constant for over 20 years of continuous monitoring. The Inupiaq community preserves traditional knowledge about time and seasonal cycles that predates atomic clock technology by centuries. Elders describe subtle differences in how time passes during different seasons and in different locations. Though these observations were traditionally attributed to changes in daylight cycles and spiritual connections to the land, some elders note that traditional hunting and fishing schedules have always accounted for time moving differently in certain areas. Visitors to Barrow occasionally comment on feeling relaxed and unhurried during their stays. though most attribute this to the remote location and absence of urban pressures. Hotel staff report that guests frequently miss alarm clocks and seem surprised by how quickly time passes during their visits, though no systematic studies have been conducted on visitor time perception. But in a room at the National Weather Service office, atomic clocks continue their patient countdown, measuring seconds that somehow stretch longer than they should in a place where the sun disappears for months at a time, where the most precise instruments ever created agree that time itself moves 4.7 seconds slower than the rest of the world. In a city where residents have learned to live at a pace that matches the rhythm of clocks that refuse to keep the same time as anywhere else on Earth. Some lights in the sky follow rules that have nothing to do with solar wind or magnetic fields. Fairbanks sits in the heart of Alaska's interior, 120 miles south of the Arctic Circle, in a region known for some of the most spectacular aurora displays on Earth. The city of 32,000 residents experiences long winter nights that provide ideal viewing conditions for the northern lights, drawing thousands of tourists annually to witness the dancing curtains of green, blue, and red light that sweep across the northern sky. The aurora borealis occurs when charged particles from the sun interact with Earth's magnetic field, creating luminous displays typically visible between 65 and 72 degrees north latitude. Fairbanks International Airport serves as Alaska's second busiest airport, handling over 1 million passengers annually and serving as a critical hub for cargo operations, supporting remote communities across Alaska's interior. The airport operates around the clock, with air traffic controllers, ground crews, and passengers providing numerous witnesses to atmospheric phenomena visible from the facility's elevated position overlooking the Tanana River Valley. The region's location within the auroral oval makes aurora sightings common from September through March, when nights are long enough for the displays to be visible against dark skies. Aurora activity correlates directly with solar activity, including solar flares, coronal mass ejections, and solar wind variations that can be predicted and measured by space weather monitoring systems. The intensity and frequency of aurora displays fluctuate with the 11-year solar cycle, with peak activity occurring during solar maximum periods. Scientists at the University of Alaska Fairbanks operate the Geophysical Institute, which maintains comprehensive aurora monitoring and research programs. The Institute's all-sky cameras, magnetometers, and ionospheric monitoring equipment provide continuous data on aurora activity, space weather conditions, and related electromagnetic phenomena. This research supports both scientific understanding of space physics and practical applications including communication systems and electrical grid protection. The anomalous aurora first appeared on September 3, 1998, at approximately 9:45 p.m. local time. Air traffic controller Janet Peterson was working the evening shift at Fairbanks International when she noticed an unusual aurora display directly overhead. The lights formed distinct vertical curtains extending from the northern horizon to nearly overhead, displaying the characteristic green coloration typical of oxygen emission at 100 kilometers altitude. Peterson had observed hundreds of aurora displays during her 12 years of working night shifts at the airport, but this particular display struck her as unusually stable and well-defined. Most aurora exhibits constant motion, with curtains of light shifting, pulsing, and dancing across the sky as solar wind conditions fluctuate. The September 3rd aurora maintains static patterns with clearly defined edges and consistent brightness levels that remained unchanged throughout Peterson's 8-hour shift. The aurora persisted through the night, remaining visible until dawn obscured the display around 6 a.m. Ground Crew Supervisor Michael Chen documented the aurora in his shift reports, noting that the lights provided enough illumination to conduct outdoor operations without additional lighting. Chen's crew worked beneath the aurora throughout the night, unloading cargo aircraft and servicing planes while the green lights remained motionless overhead. Airport maintenance worker Robert Torres photographed the aurora at hourly intervals throughout the night using a standard 35mm camera. His photographs show identical light patterns from the same viewing positions, with no apparent movement or change in the aurora's structure over 7 hours of documentation. Torres had photographed aurora displays for over a decade as a hobby, but had never captured images showing such consistent patterns over extended periods. The aurora appeared again on September 4th at exactly 9:45 p.m., displaying identical patterns and intensity as the previous night. Peterson, working consecutive shifts, documented the aurora's return in her air traffic control logs. The lights occupied the same positions in the sky, maintained the same brightness levels, and exhibited the same static behavior observed the previous evening. Peterson attempted to contact the Geophysical Institute to report the unusual aurora persistence, but received no response to her calls. Over the following 10 nights, the aurora appeared with mechanical regularity, always beginning at 9:45 p.m. and persisting until dawn. Airport personnel began anticipating the display, gathering outside terminals and hangars to observe the nightly phenomenon. The aurora's predictability contradicted fundamental understanding of aurora formation, which depends on highly variable solar wind conditions that change constantly based on solar activity millions of miles away. Dr. Margaret Wilson, an atmospheric physicist visiting Fairbanks for an unrelated conference, observed the aurora on September 7th and 8th. Wilson had studied aurora phenomena for 20 years and immediately recognized the unusual characteristics of the Fairbanks display. Aurora are fundamentally dynamic phenomena, Wilson noted in her journal. They respond to real-time changes in solar wind speed, density, and magnetic field orientation. A static aurora that appears on schedule defies everything we understand about space physics. Local photographer Lisa Park documented the aurora throughout the 11-night period, creating a comprehensive photographic record of the phenomenon. Park's images, taken from multiple locations around Fairbanks, show that the aurora maintained identical geometry and intensity, regardless of viewing angle or atmospheric conditions. Time-lapse photography revealed no motion, pulsation, or variation in the light patterns over periods of several hours. Fairbanks resident David Chen, a retired electrical engineer, attempted to correlate the aurora appearances with local electrical grid activity and radio communications. Chen's monitoring equipment detected no electromagnetic anomalies associated with the aurora displays, despite the light's apparent intensity and proximity to ground-based infrastructure. Radio communications, which typically experience interference during strong aurora activity, remained clear and unaffected throughout the 11-night period. The Geophysical Institute at the University of Alaska Fairbanks initially dismissed reports of the stationary aurora as observer error or atmospheric optical illusions. Dr. Sarah Torres, the Institute's Aurora Research Coordinator, noted that solar wind measurements from satellite monitoring systems showed minimal activity during early September 1998, conditions that would typically produce no aurora activity at Fairbanks latitude. However, when Institute researchers reviewed all-sky camera footage from the period, they confirmed the presence of aurora displays on all 11 nights, recorded with identical patterns and timing as reported by airport personnel. The camera systems, designed to automatically detect and record aurora activity, captured high-quality images showing well-defined aurora structures that remained static throughout each night's observation period. Dr. Torres contacted NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center to report the anomalous aurora observations and request analysis of space weather data for the period. NASA's initial response indicated that satellite measurements showed no solar activity sufficient to generate aurora displays at Fairbanks latitude during early September 1998. Solar wind speed, density, and magnetic field measurements were all below threshold levels typically required for visible aurora activity. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Space Weather Prediction Center reviewed geomagnetic activity data for September 1998 and confirmed minimal disturbance levels throughout the period when aurora displays were reported over Fairbanks. The center's analysis found no correlation between measured space weather conditions and the reported aurora observations, leading to questions about the accuracy of ground-based reports. NASA dispatched a team of space physics researchers to Fairbanks in late September to investigate the aurora reports and conduct independent measurements of ionospheric conditions. The team arrived after the aurora displays had ended but interviewed witnesses and reviewed photographic documentation collected during the 11-night period. Their preliminary findings acknowledged the existence of documented aurora activity but could offer no explanation for the phenomenon based on measured solar and geomagnetic conditions. The NASA investigation report, completed in November 1998, concluded that unusual ionospheric conditions had created localized aurora displays over Fairbanks despite minimal solar activity. However, the report provided no specific data about these ionospheric conditions or theoretical mechanisms that could explain sustained aurora activity independent of solar wind variations. The investigation team recommended continued monitoring, but offered no plans for follow-up research. The Geophysical Institute quietly archived its aurora data from September 1998 without publishing research papers or presenting findings at scientific conferences. Dr. Torres transferred to a position at another institution in early 1999, citing personal reasons for her departure. The Institute's public aurora monitoring reports for September 1998 make no reference to the 11-night display sequence or unusual aurora characteristics. Airport personnel who witnessed the aurora phenomenon received informal guidance from management to avoid discussing the displays with media or outside researchers. Several employees noted that their shift reports from early September 1998 were removed from normal filing systems and transferred to administrative archives not accessible to routine operations staff. Current aurora monitoring at Fairbanks International continues through automated systems and occasional visual observations by airport personnel. However, no aurora displays with the duration, regularity, or static characteristics of the September 1998 phenomenon have been reported or recorded since that time. The University of Alaska Fairbanks maintains its aurora research programs, but focuses on conventional aurora mechanisms related to solar activity and geomagnetic disturbances. But sometimes, during clear September nights when solar activity levels are low and aurora displays should be impossible, airport workers glance toward the northern sky and remember 11 nights when the lights appeared on schedule like clockwork, hanging motionless in the darkness above runways and terminals, where planes came and went beneath an aurora that ignored every rule about how light should behave in the thin air between Earth and space. Some boundaries refuse to stay where they are placed, migrating across the landscape with mathematical precision that defies the forces that should keep them anchored to the Earth. Gates of the Arctic National Park encompasses 8.4 million acres of pristine wilderness in northern Alaska, making it the second largest national park in the United States. Established in 1980, the park protects vast expanses of tundra, boreal forest, and rugged mountain ranges, including portions of the Brooks Range that divide Alaska's interior from the Arctic coastal plain. The park contains no roads, trails, or permanent facilities, representing one of the last truly untouched wilderness areas in North America. The region experiences extreme seasonal variations, with winter temperatures dropping to 60 degrees below zero and summer highs occasionally reaching 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Permafrost underlies most of the park, creating unique geological conditions where the ground remains frozen year-round except for a thin active layer that thaws during brief summer months. This permafrost creates challenges for any permanent installations, as freeze-thaw cycles can shift buried objects and destabilize surface markers. Survey work within Gates of the Arctic requires special permits and follows strict protocols to minimize environmental impact. The National Park Service conducts limited boundary surveys to establish legal park boundaries, monitor ecosystem changes, and support scientific research. Survey markers must be precisely positioned and regularly verified to maintain accurate land records and ensure compliance with federal land management regulations. The park's remote location and harsh climate make survey work logistically challenging and expensive. Survey teams typically access sites by helicopter or small aircraft, working during narrow weather windows, when conditions permit safe operations. All equipment must be transported by air, and teams often work in isolation for weeks at a time, making accurate documentation and GPS positioning critical for safety and scientific validity. The first documented marker movement was recorded on October 12, 1976, when National Park Service surveyor Dr. Robert Peterson discovered that survey stakes installed 6 months earlier had shifted position. Peterson was conducting routine verification of boundary markers established during preliminary park planning when his GPS readings showed discrepancies between recorded coordinates and actual stake positions. The stakes had moved exactly 47 feet northeast of their original locations. Peterson initially assumed the movement resulted from permafrost activity or human interference, both common causes of survey marker displacement in Arctic environments. However, when he examined the stakes closely, they appeared undisturbed and properly seated in the ground. The stakes maintained their original vertical orientation and showed no signs of excavation or disturbance around their bases. Most significantly, all 17 stakes in the survey grid had moved identical distances in the same direction. Peterson documented the position changes using differential GPS equipment accurate to within centimeters. His measurements confirmed that every stake had moved exactly 47 feet on a bearing of 45 degrees northeast. The stakes maintained their original spacing and alignment relative to each other, as if the entire survey grid had shifted as a unit across the landscape. Peterson's field notes described the discovery as unprecedented in my 23 years of survey experience. The National Park Service dispatched additional survey teams to verify Peterson's findings and investigate potential causes of the marker movement. Survey Supervisor Dr. Margaret Chen arrived at the site in November 1976 with equipment to reestablish the original survey grid. Chen's team installed new stakes at the coordinates specified in the original survey, using concrete footings and steel reinforcement designed to prevent movement due to permafrost activity. Chen's team also installed motion detection equipment and time-lapse cameras to monitor the new stakes for any indication of movement or disturbance. The monitoring equipment operated on solar power with battery backup, designed to function through the Arctic winter and document any changes in stake position. Chen's installation report noted that soil conditions appeared stable and showed no evidence of ongoing geological activity that would explain the synchronized marker movement. 6 months later, in May 1977, Chen returned to find that both the original moved stakes and the new replacement stakes had shifted another 47 feet northeast. The monitoring equipment confirmed that the movement occurred gradually over a 3-week period in late April, with stakes moving approximately 2 feet per day until reaching their new positions. Time-lapse photography showed the stakes appearing to slide smoothly across the ground surface without disturbing surrounding vegetation or soil. Survey technician Michael Torres, who reviewed the time-lapse footage, described the movement as unlike anything in our training or experience. The stakes appeared to maintain vertical orientation while gliding across the landscape, leaving no visible tracks or disturbance patterns. Vegetation around the stakes remained undisturbed, and snow cover showed no indication that the stakes had been excavated or manually relocated. Dr. Sarah Wilson, a permafrost specialist from the University of Alaska, investigated potential geological causes of the marker movement in June 1977. Wilson's team conducted subsurface surveys using ground-penetrating radar and soil analysis to identify underground ice formations, soil instability, or other factors that might cause synchronized surface movement. The investigation found typical permafrost conditions, with no unusual geological features that would explain coordinated movement of surface objects. Wilson's analysis of soil cores and permafrost samples revealed stable ground conditions with no evidence of mass movement, underground ice flow, or other geological processes that typically cause surface displacement. The soil chemistry and ice content are completely normal for this region, Wilson reported. There's no geological mechanism that would cause surface markers to move in such a coordinated fashion, while leaving surrounding terrain undisturbed. The phenomenon continued with mechanical regularity throughout the late 1970s. with survey stakes moving exactly 47 feet northeast every 6 months. The National Park Service attempted various stake designs and installation methods, including concrete monuments, steel posts, and aluminum markers. All government survey equipment exhibited identical movement patterns, regardless of material, size, or installation technique. Private survey contractor Lisa Park was hired to install independent survey markers using non-government equipment in 1979. Park stakes, manufactured by a different company and installed using commercial survey protocols, remained stationary while nearby Park Service markers continued their biannual migration. Our stakes stayed exactly where we put them, Park noted, but the government stakes 50 feet away moved right on schedule. Same soil, same weather, same installation methods, but only the Park Service equipment moved. The U.S. Geological Survey launched a comprehensive investigation of the marker movement phenomenon in 1980, deploying seismic monitoring equipment, GPS tracking systems, and geological survey teams to study the affected area. The investigation found no seismic activity, soil movement, or underground geological processes that could explain the synchronized marker migration. Seismographs detected no ground motion during periods when stakes were documented to be moving. USGS geophysicist Dr. Robert Chen noted that the marker movement violated fundamental principles of soil mechanics and permafrost behavior. Objects don't move through frozen ground without disturbing surrounding material, Chen explained. The stakes appear to be moving through solid permafrost, as if it were liquid, yet core samples show the ground remains frozen solid throughout the movement periods. The investigation team installed experimental monitoring equipment, including underground motion detectors, strain gauges, and thermal sensors designed to identify any environmental factors associated with the marker movement. The instruments detected no subsurface activity, temperature changes, or soil displacement during documented movement periods. The stakes appeared to move without affecting any other aspect of the local environment. Federal funding for research into the marker movement phenomenon was discontinued in 1982 without explanation. The National Park Service classified all documentation related to the survey stake anomaly under administrative protocols that restricted access to research findings and field reports. Survey teams were advised to use alternative boundary marking methods that did not require permanent installations within the affected area. The U.S. Geological Survey transferred personnel who had worked on the Gates of the Arctic investigation to other assignments, and no follow-up research was conducted to verify whether the marker movement continued beyond 1982. Dr. Peterson, who had discovered the original movement, retired early and relocated outside Alaska. Dr. Chen transferred to geological survey work in the lower 48 states. Current National Park Service operations in Gates of the Arctic avoid the use of permanent survey markers in areas where the movement phenomenon was documented. Boundary verification relies on GPS coordinates and natural landmarks rather than installed stakes or monuments. Park documentation makes no reference to the historical marker movement or the research conducted during the late 1970s and early 1980s. Private survey companies working in northern Alaska occasionally report equipment displacement that follows patterns similar to the Gates of the Arctic phenomenon, though these reports are typically attributed to permafrost activity or equipment failure. The survey industry has developed procedures for verifying marker positions using multiple independent systems to account for potential displacement in Arctic environments. But somewhere in the vast wilderness of Gates of the Arctic National Park, survey stakes may still be making their methodical migration across the tundra, moving exactly 47 feet northeast every 6 months with the precision of clockwork, following a schedule that has nothing to do with seasons or geology, in a place where the ground itself seems to remember that some boundaries are meant to move, whether or not anyone is watching them travel their endless, measured journey across the frozen landscape. Some machines know what the sky will do tomorrow with a certainty that makes meteorologists question whether they understand weather at all. Cold Bay sits at the eastern end of the Alaska Peninsula, a remote outpost of 100 residents facing the turbulent waters where the North Pacific meets the Bering Sea. The community exists primarily to support Cold Bay Airport, a critical refueling stop for international flights crossing the Pacific, and to maintain weather monitoring infrastructure essential for aviation safety across one of the world's most challenging flight corridors. The region experiences some of the most unpredictable and severe weather on Earth, with sudden storms, dense fog, and wind speeds exceeding 100 miles per hour. The Aleutian Islands chain stretches over 1,000 miles westward from the Alaska Peninsula, creating a geographic boundary between the Pacific Ocean and Bering Sea that generates complex weather patterns affecting global atmospheric circulation. Cold Bay's position at this critical junction makes it an essential monitoring point for weather systems that impact aviation, shipping, and climate patterns across the North Pacific. The area experiences rapid weather changes that can shift from clear skies to zero visibility within minutes. Weather forecasting in the Aleutian region presents extraordinary challenges due to the scarcity of observation points, extreme atmospheric variability, and the interaction of multiple weather systems converging from different directions. Traditional meteorological models rely on extensive networks of weather stations, satellite data, and supercomputer analysis to generate forecasts with accuracy rates that decrease significantly beyond 72 hours. Even the most sophisticated forecasting systems struggle to predict Aleutian weather conditions more than 24 hours in advance. Cold Bay Station operates as part of the National Weather Service's Automated Surface Observing System, collecting data on temperature, humidity, wind speed, barometric pressure, and visibility every hour. This information feeds into national weather databases used for aviation forecasts, marine warnings, and climate monitoring. The station's equipment includes standard meteorological instruments calibrated regularly to ensure accuracy and consistency with other monitoring sites across Alaska. The predictive anomaly was first noticed on July 9, 1994, when National Weather Service meteorologist Dr. Janet Peterson reviewed automated reports from Cold Bay Station and discovered that the station's forecast data preceded actual weather conditions by exactly 18 hours. Peterson was conducting routine quality control on weather data when she noticed that conditions reported as forecast by Cold Bay Station consistently matched observed conditions that occurred 18 hours later at the same location. Peterson initially assumed the anomaly resulted from incorrect timestamps or data processing errors common in automated weather systems. However, when she examined 6 months of historical data from Cold Bay Station, she found the 18-hour predictive pattern occurred consistently across all weather parameters. Temperature, humidity, wind direction, and barometric pressure readings listed as forecasts proved accurate to within measurement tolerances when compared to subsequent observations. The accuracy rate far exceeded normal forecasting capabilities. Standard weather prediction models achieve accuracy rates of approximately 60 to 70% for 24-hour forecasts, with accuracy declining rapidly for longer prediction periods. Cold Bay Station's 18-hour forecasts showed accuracy rates exceeding 99% across all measured parameters, a level of precision that surpassed the most sophisticated supercomputer weather models operated by the National Weather Service. Dr. Peterson contacted Cold Bay Station maintenance technician Michael Chen to investigate potential equipment malfunctions or programming errors that might explain the anomalous forecast data. Chen conducted comprehensive testing of the station's sensors, data logging systems, and communication equipment. All components functioned within normal parameters, and the station continued to generate hourly observations that matched standard meteorological protocols. Chen's investigation revealed that the station's automated forecasting system had no programming or capability to generate predictive weather data. The equipment was designed solely to observe and report current conditions, not to analyze trends or project future weather patterns. Yet the station's data transmissions consistently included forecast information that proved accurate 18 hours before the predicted conditions actually occurred. Dr. Peterson expanded her analysis to include weather stations throughout Alaska and the North Pacific region, comparing Cold Bay's predictive accuracy with forecasting performance at other automated sites. No other weather station demonstrated similar predictive capabilities, despite using identical equipment and operating procedures. Cold Bay Station appeared to be uniquely capable of generating accurate weather forecasts, using equipment not designed for predictive analysis. National Weather Service Regional Supervisor, Dr. Robert Torres, reviewed Peterson's findings in October 1994 and authorized additional investigation into the Cold Bay forecasting anomaly. Torres assembled a team of meteorologists and electronics specialists to conduct on-site testing of the station's equipment and data processing systems. The team found no evidence of equipment modification, unauthorized software, or external data sources that could explain the predictive accuracy. Aviation meteorologist Sarah Wilson, who relied on Cold Bay weather data for flight planning across the North Pacific, began tracking the station's forecasting accuracy for operational purposes. Wilson's analysis confirmed the 18-hour predictive pattern and documented numerous instances where Cold Bay forecasts provided critical advance warning of dangerous weather conditions that conventional forecasting models failed to predict. Cold Bay was consistently the most reliable weather information source for our flight operations, Wilson noted in her operational reports. The 18-hour forecasts were more accurate than our best computer models running on real-time data. Pilots started requesting Cold Bay forecasts specifically because they could plan routes and fuel loads with confidence that the weather information would be correct. The Federal Aviation Administration began incorporating Cold Bay's predictive weather data into flight planning systems for North Pacific routes in 1995, despite the lack of explanation for the station's forecasting accuracy. FAA meteorologist Dr. Lisa Park noted that Cold Bay forecasts prevented numerous flight diversions and emergency landings by providing advance warning of deteriorating weather conditions that other forecasting systems missed. We had pilots making critical decisions based on 18-hour forecasts from a station that shouldn't be able to generate forecasts at all, Park documented in her operational analysis. The safety implications were significant enough that we incorporated the data into official flight planning procedures, even though we couldn't explain how the station was producing such accurate predictions. The National Weather Service classified research into the Cold Bay forecasting anomaly in 1996 under administrative protocols related to operational forecasting systems. Dr. Peterson and other researchers working on the project were transferred to different assignments, and funding for investigation into automated station anomalies was discontinued. The official explanation cited proprietary forecasting algorithms developed for Arctic weather prediction, though no documentation of such algorithms was ever released. The Department of Defense began receiving direct data feeds from Cold Bay Station in 1997 through classified communication channels separate from normal National Weather Service networks. Military weather specialists noted the station's exceptional forecasting accuracy, but were advised that the predictive capabilities resulted from experimental forecasting technology being tested under operational conditions. Dr. Torres, who had supervised the original investigation, transferred to a position with a private weather forecasting company in 1998. In his final National Weather Service report, Torres noted that Cold Bay Station demonstrates forecasting capabilities that exceed current scientific understanding of atmospheric prediction methods. Continued operational use of the station's forecasts is recommended, despite the lack of theoretical explanation for the predictive accuracy. Universities conducting atmospheric research requested access to Cold Bay Station data for academic analysis of the forecasting methods, but these requests were denied, citing operational security requirements. The station's data was reclassified as restricted access in 1999, available only to authorized government agencies and specific aviation organizations with security clearances. Cold Bay Station maintenance protocols were modified in 2000 to require specialized clearance for technicians working on the forecasting systems. Standard Weather Service personnel were restricted to basic maintenance of observation equipment, while forecasting system maintenance was transferred to contractors with undisclosed technical specifications and security requirements. Current weather operations at Cold Bay continue to generate 18-hour forecasts with accuracy rates that remain unexplained by conventional meteorological science. The station's predictions are incorporated into numerous government and military weather databases, though the forecasting methods are classified and not available for academic or commercial research. Aviation operations across the North Pacific continue to rely on Cold Bay forecasts as the most accurate weather information source for the region. Local residents of Cold Bay have learned to check the station's 18-hour forecasts for planning outdoor activities, fishing operations, and travel arrangements. Many residents note that the station's predictions are more reliable than television weather forecasts or commercial weather services. Though they rarely question why a small automated station in their remote community can see tomorrow's weather with clarity that eludes the most sophisticated forecasting systems in the world. But in a small building filled with standard meteorological equipment, sensors continue to measure today's weather while somehow knowing exactly what tomorrow will bring, generating forecasts with precision that suggest the atmosphere itself is more predictable than science believes possible, or that some machines have learned to read the sky in ways their creators never intended. In a place where tomorrow's weather arrives on schedule, with the reliability of clockwork, in a landscape where nothing else about the weather has ever been predictable. Some buildings refuse to accept that their purpose has ended, continuing to fulfill their function long after the last student has gone home. Chicken, Alaska, sits along the Taylor Highway in the eastern interior, a former gold mining settlement that peaked at 700 residents during the early 20th century boom. By the 1980s, fewer than 30 people remained in the community, most living year-round in cabins scattered along Chicken Creek and the 40 Mile River. The town's isolation, accessible only by a gravel road that closes during winter months, created a tight-knit community where everyone knew their neighbors and shared resources during the harsh Arctic winters. The settlement's name reportedly came from early miners who wanted to call their town Ptarmigan but couldn't agree on the spelling, settling instead on the simpler alternative. Gold mining sustained the community through multiple boom and bust cycles, with dredging operations along the 40 Mile River, providing employment and bringing families to the remote location. By the 1970s, most mining had ceased, leaving behind equipment, abandoned cabins, and the infrastructure of a community larger than its remaining population could support. Chicken Elementary School served the community's children from 1947 through 1982, housed in a single-story log building with 2 classrooms, a small library, and administrative offices. The school typically enrolled 8 to 15 students across grades 1 through 8, with 1 or 2 teachers providing instruction for all grade levels. The building included basic amenities, including electricity, oil heating, and a well for water, though it lacked modern conveniences like telephone service or reliable internet connectivity. The school's remote location required careful planning for supplies, textbooks, and materials, which were typically delivered once or twice per year during the summer months when the Taylor Highway was passable. Teachers lived in quarters attached to the school building or in nearby cabins, forming close relationships with students and families in the small community. The school served as a community center for meetings, social events, and emergency shelter during severe weather. The final school year ended in May 1982, when enrollment dropped to 3 students, and the state determined that maintaining the facility was no longer cost-effective. The remaining students were transferred to schools in Talk or Fairbanks, requiring them to board away from home during the school year. The building was officially closed in August 1982, with equipment and supplies distributed to other rural schools or placed in storage. The anomalous activity began in September 1983 when maintenance worker Robert Peterson discovered that the abandoned school building was consuming electricity at levels consistent with normal operations. Peterson had been hired by the state to conduct quarterly inspections of the closed facility and prepare it for potential sale or demolition. His initial inspection revealed that heating systems were operating on schedule, lights were turned on during daytime hours, and electrical usage matched patterns from when the school was actively serving students. Peterson initially assumed that electrical systems had malfunctioned or that someone was using the building without authorization. However, when he examined the building's interior, he found evidence of organized activity that suggested ongoing educational operations. Classrooms contained fresh lesson plans written on whiteboards, textbooks arranged for daily use, and student desks positioned as if prepared for classes that would begin the following morning. The lesson plans were written in neat handwriting that didn't match any of the previous teachers who had worked at the school. The content covered appropriate grade-level material in mathematics, reading, science, and social studies, following Alaska State education standards for elementary instruction. The plans included detailed schedules, learning objectives, and assessment methods that demonstrated thorough knowledge of educational practices and curriculum requirements. Peterson discovered that books in the school's small library were being checked out and returned according to the card catalog system, with checkout cards showing dates, book titles, and student names written in pencil. The names didn't correspond to any children known to live in the Chicken area, and the handwriting appeared to be from multiple different students across various grade levels. Books were properly shelved, with checkout records indicating regular circulation patterns typical of an active school library. Standardized test forms for the 1983 school year were found completed in pencil, with student names, answers, and identification numbers filled in according to proper testing procedures. The tests covered material appropriate for elementary grade levels and showed varying levels of academic achievement across different subjects. The answer sheets were properly completed using number 2 pencils and appeared ready for submission to state education authorities for scoring. Local resident Janet Chen, whose property bordered the school grounds, reported observing lights in the building during evening hours and hearing sounds consistent with classroom activities. Chen lived approximately 1/4 mile from the school and had clear views of the building from her cabin windows. She documented lights turning on and off in different rooms according to schedules that matched typical school day operations, with activity beginning around 8 a.m. and ending near 3 p.m. I'd see the lights come on in the morning, different rooms lighting up like teachers and students were moving between classrooms, Chen recalled. Sometimes I'd hear what sounded like children playing outside during recess, but when I looked, there was nobody there. I figured maybe it was wind or animals, but it happened too regularly to be coincidence. Maintenance worker Michael Torres, who assisted Peterson with building inspections, documented unusual heating patterns that suggested occupied spaces. The building's oil heating system operated efficiently, maintaining comfortable temperatures in classrooms and common areas while allowing unused spaces like storage rooms to remain cooler. Thermostat settings had been adjusted to provide optimal learning environments, with temperatures set differently for various rooms based on their intended use. The heating system was running like someone was managing it day by day, Torres noted in his inspection reports. Different rooms at different temperatures, schedules that matched school operations, oil consumption that suggested normal occupancy levels. Either someone was living there and managing everything perfectly, or the building was somehow running itself. The Alaska Department of Education investigated the Chicken Elementary situation in November 1983 after receiving reports of ongoing activity at the closed facility. Education specialist Dr. Sarah Wilson visited the site and documented evidence of continued educational activities, including completed worksheets, organized classroom materials, and library records showing recent book circulation. Wilson's report noted that all materials appeared to follow appropriate educational standards, despite the absence of authorized staff or enrolled students. Wilson's investigation revealed that heating oil deliveries to the school had continued on schedule, despite the building's closed status. The delivery company had received properly completed order forms requesting fuel deliveries, with payment authorized through what appeared to be legitimate school district accounts. The paperwork included accurate account numbers and authorization codes, processed through normal administrative channels without raising questions from suppliers or accounting departments. The state school district conducted an audit of the Chicken Elementary accounts in January 1984, finding that expenditures for utilities, supplies, and maintenance continued at levels consistent with an operating school. Purchase orders for textbooks, paper, pencils, and other educational materials had been submitted and approved through standard procurement processes. All paperwork appeared properly completed and authorized, though no district personnel could explain who was generating the orders. Attempts to identify the source of the continued activity proved unsuccessful. The building had no telephone service, making remote management impossible. No vehicles were observed at the school site, and snow around the building showed no tire tracks or footprints during winter inspections. Security measures, including locks and alarm systems, remained intact, with no evidence of unauthorized entry or tampering. The Department of Education classified the Chicken Elementary investigation in March 1984 under administrative protocols related to rural school operations. Dr. Wilson was reassigned to other duties, and future inspections of the facility were limited to basic maintenance and security checks. Official reports attributed the ongoing activity to administrative processing delays related to the school closure, though no specific explanation was provided for the documented educational activities. Local authorities received instructions to treat the school building as officially closed and to discontinue detailed inspections of interior conditions. Utility companies were advised to maintain service to prevent damage from freezing temperatures, but were instructed not to question usage patterns or consumption levels. The building remained officially vacant while continuing to operate as if serving a full student population. The state legislature approved funding for demolition of the Chicken Elementary building in July 1987, citing safety concerns and maintenance costs. The demolition contract specified complete removal of the structure and proper disposal of any educational materials or equipment found on site. Demolition crews were scheduled to begin work in September 1987, after completion of the theoretical 1986 to 1987 school year. However, when demolition workers arrived at the site in September 1988, they found that the building had been systematically emptied of educational materials. Textbooks, supplies, furniture, and equipment had been removed, leaving only the basic structure ready for demolition. Library books were properly packed and labeled, classroom materials were organized for storage, and all educational resources appeared to have been professionally relocated according to standard school closure procedures. No one could explain who had cleared the building or where the materials had been taken. School district personnel had no record of authorizing the removal, and no moving companies reported contracts for services at the Chicken Elementary site. The building stood empty and clean, as if the educational operation had concluded naturally at the end of the school year, and all materials had been properly transferred to continuing programs elsewhere. Demolition proceeded without incident, and the site was cleared by October 1988. All records related to the Chicken Elementary investigation were transferred to state archives, where they were classified under administrative storage protocols. Current inquiries about the school's operational history are referred to archive departments that report no documentation exists for the period between 1983 and 1987. But sometimes, during quiet September mornings when the Taylor Highway is empty and the abandoned mining equipment sits silent in the morning mist, travelers passing through Chicken report hearing the distant sound of a school bell ringing across the valley, calling students to classes in a building that no longer exists. In a place where education continued for 4 years after the last teacher left and the final student graduated to schools in distant towns that could never quite replace the lessons learned in a classroom that taught itself. Some messages arrive before they are sent, carrying news of events that have not yet happened to people who have learned not to question why tomorrow's mail comes today. Arctic Village sits 290 miles north of Fairbanks in the Brooks Range foothills, one of the most remote communities in Alaska, with a population of 152 residents, primarily Gwich'in people whose ancestors have lived in the region for thousands of years. The village lies within the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, accessible only by small aircraft during summer months and snow machines during winter, creating one of the most isolated postal delivery routes in the United States postal system. The community depends entirely on air delivery for mail and supplies, with scheduled flights arriving twice weekly during good weather and less frequently during winter storms that can ground aircraft for weeks at a time. Mail service to Arctic Village requires coordination between multiple postal facilities, aircraft operators, and weather monitoring systems to ensure reliable delivery to residents who may wait months for critical communications, medical supplies, or government documents. The village's isolation means that mail delivery often carries exceptional importance, bringing news from family members living in other communities, medical test results from distant hospitals, and government correspondence related to subsistence hunting rights and land use permits. Postal service interruptions can have serious consequences for residents who depend on timely delivery of prescription medications, Social Security checks, and other essential communications. The postal route to Arctic Village follows standard processing procedures through Fairbanks, Anchorage, and ultimately to the village via chartered aircraft. Mail is sorted, postmarked, and tracked using the same systems employed throughout Alaska's rural postal network. The United States Postal Service maintains detailed records of processing times, transportation schedules, and delivery dates to ensure accountability and efficient service to remote communities. The temporal anomaly was first documented on March 15, 1981, when Postal Inspector Janet Peterson conducted a routine audit of delivery times to remote Alaska communities. Peterson was reviewing mail processing records when she discovered that letters postmarked in Fairbanks on March 22 had been delivered to Arctic Village on March 15. 7 days before, they were officially processed and stamped by postal workers. Peterson initially assumed the discrepancy resulted from clerical errors or incorrect date stamps, common issues in manual mail processing systems. However, when she examined a larger sample of mail delivery records for Arctic Village, she found that the 7-day advance delivery pattern occurred consistently across all types of mail, including letters, packages, and government correspondence. The temporal displacement remained constant regardless of weather conditions, aircraft schedules, or postal worker shifts. The advance delivery phenomenon appeared to affect only mail destined for Arctic Village. Letters and packages sent to other remote communities in northern Alaska followed normal processing and delivery schedules, arriving days or weeks after their postmarked dates, depending on weather and transportation conditions. Arctic Village Mail maintained proper postal service tracking throughout the delivery process, passing through standard sorting facilities and following documented transportation routes, while somehow arriving before the processing was complete. Peterson expanded her investigation to include postal workers at facilities handling Arctic Village mail. Fairbanks Postal Supervisor Robert Chen confirmed that mail for Arctic Village was processed according to standard procedures, with letters and packages receiving postmarks indicating the actual date and time of processing. However, delivery confirmations from Arctic Village consistently showed arrival dates that preceded the postmark dates by exactly 7 days. Village Postal Clerk Sarah Wilson, who had managed mail distribution in Arctic Village for 12 years, confirmed that mail arrived regularly according to the advanced schedule, but expressed no surprise about the timing discrepancy. Wilson's records showed that residents had adapted to receiving mail before the official postmark dates, treating the phenomenon as a normal characteristic of their remote location, rather than an unusual occurrence requiring explanation. "People here just got used to it," Wilson explained. "We'd get letters postmarked next week, but they'd be talking about things that were happening right now. Sometimes we'd get mail from relatives in Fairbanks telling us about events before those events actually happened. It seemed strange at first, but after a while, you just accept that mail works differently up here." Village Elder Michael Torres noted that the advance mail delivery often provided residents with information about family members before significant events occurred in other communities. We'd get letters from our kids in Anchorage telling us they were getting married or having babies, and then a week later we'd get phone calls with the same news. At first, we thought our relatives were just slow to call, but then we realized the letters were arriving before they were sent. Dr. Margaret Peterson, a linguist studying Gwich'in oral traditions, documented stories from village elders describing similar temporal phenomena in traditional narratives. According to these accounts, certain locations in Gwich'in territory were known as places where tomorrow's news comes today, though the stories typically referred to dreams, visions, or spiritual communications rather than physical mail delivery. The United States Postal Service launched an official investigation into the Arctic Village delivery anomaly in September 1981, dispatching a team of postal inspectors and logistics specialists to examine mail processing and transportation procedures. The investigation found no evidence of misprocessed dates, transportation irregularities, or clerical errors that could explain the consistent 7-day advance delivery pattern. Postal Inspector Dr. Lisa Park supervised comprehensive testing of the Arctic Village mail route, including detailed tracking of individual letters and packages from initial processing through final delivery. The testing confirmed that mail followed standard postal procedures, passed through appropriate sorting facilities, and was transported to Arctic Village using normal aircraft schedules, yet consistently arrived 7 days before the postmarked dates indicated. The investigation team attempted to identify potential causes of the temporal displacement, including time zone errors, calendar discrepancies, and equipment malfunctions. However, all postal equipment functioned properly, timestamps were accurate, and calendar systems matched standard Postal Service protocols. The 7-day advance delivery pattern appeared to be an inherent characteristic of mail service to Arctic Village, rather than a systematic error in postal operations. Federal Aviation Administration officials reviewed aircraft schedules and flight logs for Arctic Village mail delivery, confirming that planes departed Fairbanks according to documented schedules and arrived at Arctic Village within normal flight times. Pilots reported no unusual navigation anomalies, time discrepancies, or equipment malfunctions during mail delivery flights. The aircraft operations appeared normal in all respects, except for the arrival dates recorded by village postal services. The National Institute of Standards and Technology investigated potential time measurement anomalies in the Arctic Village area, deploying atomic clocks and GPS timing equipment to verify local time accuracy. The measurements confirmed that time progressed normally in Arctic Village, with no temporal distortions or chronometer discrepancies that could explain mail arriving before its postmark date. The Postal Service investigation concluded in February 1982 with a classified report acknowledging the 7-day advance delivery pattern but offering no explanation for the phenomenon. The report recommended continued postal service to Arctic Village using standard procedures, while noting the temporal anomaly as an unexplained characteristic of the delivery route that did not interfere with mail service reliability or safety. Postal inspectors were instructed to treat the Arctic Village delivery anomaly as an administrative peculiarity rather than a service problem requiring correction. Future investigations of the route were discontinued, and postal workers were advised to process Arctic Village mail according to normal procedures without attempting to adjust for the temporal displacement. The Department of Defense classified certain aspects of the Arctic Village postal investigation in 1983 under protocols related to remote area communications and navigation systems. Academic researchers requesting access to Postal Service data for the route were advised that operational information was not available for public analysis due to national security considerations related to Alaska communications infrastructure. Dr. Park, who had supervised the Postal Service investigation, transferred to a different assignment in 1984 and declined to discuss her findings related to Arctic Village mail delivery. In her final report, she noted that certain postal routes in remote Alaska exhibit operational characteristics that exceed current understanding of mail processing and delivery systems, requiring continued monitoring through appropriate administrative channels. Current postal service to Arctic Village continues to operate with the 7-day advance delivery pattern, now documented for over 40 years of continuous mail service. Postal workers in Fairbanks process Arctic Village mail according to standard procedures, while noting in unofficial communications that letters consistently arrive at their destination before completing the processing cycle that created them. Village residents have integrated the advanced mail delivery into their daily routines, often receiving information about family events, medical appointments, and community activities before those events occur in the locations where the letters originated. Many residents report using the advanced information to make travel plans or prepare for family emergencies, though they rarely discuss the temporal aspects of their mail service with outsiders. But every Tuesday and Friday, when the mail plane lands on Arctic Village's gravel airstrip, residents gather to collect letters and packages that carry tomorrow's news delivered today, in a place where the Postal Service has learned to deliver mail on a schedule that ignores the normal flow of time, where yesterday's letters bring news of events that will happen next week, and where the postmarked dates serve as predictions rather than records of when the mail began its impossible journey backward through time. Some research facilities produce groundbreaking science without any scientists, publishing discoveries that advance human knowledge through experiments that were never designed by human minds. Toolik Field Station sits at 68 degrees north latitude on Alaska's North Slope, 130 miles south of Prudhoe Bay, in the heart of Arctic tundra that stretches unbroken to the horizon. Established in 1975 to support biological research in the Arctic, the station operates under the University of Alaska Fairbanks and provides laboratory facilities, housing, and logistical support for scientists studying climate change, ecology, and environmental conditions in one of Earth's most pristine and rapidly changing ecosystems. The station consists of multiple research buildings, dormitories, and support facilities positioned along the shores of Toolik Lake, a deep glacial lake that serves as a natural laboratory for freshwater ecology studies. The remote location, accessible only by aircraft or the Dalton Highway during summer months, provides researchers with access to undisturbed Arctic environments essential for understanding climate change impacts and ecosystem responses to warming temperatures. Toolik Field Station hosts researchers from universities worldwide, supporting studies ranging from permafrost dynamics and carbon cycling to plant biology and wildlife behavior. The facility maintains sophisticated laboratory equipment, meteorological monitoring systems, and data collection infrastructure that enables complex scientific research despite its isolation. Research conducted at Toolik has contributed significantly to understanding Arctic climate systems and global environmental change processes. The Arctic location provides unique research opportunities due to its sensitivity to climate change, with temperatures rising twice as fast as global averages and permafrost thawing at accelerating rates. Scientists use Toolik as a base for long-term studies that track ecosystem changes over decades, providing critical data for climate models and environmental policy decisions affecting the Arctic and global climate systems. The first anomalous publication appeared in the Journal of Arctic Research in September 1994, describing a comprehensive study of permafrost carbon release conducted at Toolik Field Station. The paper, titled Accelerated Carbon Flux Dynamics in Thawing Permafrost Ecosystems, presented detailed measurements of soil carbon emissions across multiple Arctic tundra sites near the station. The research included sophisticated data analysis, statistical modeling, and findings that significantly advanced understanding of climate change impacts on Arctic carbon cycles. However, when University of Alaska administrators reviewed the publication, they found no record of the research project in their files. No faculty members or graduate students had been assigned to conduct the described experiments. No funding had been allocated for the research, and no equipment purchases or fieldwork permits corresponded to the activities described in the paper. The study appeared to have been conducted by researchers who did not exist, using resources that had not been provided. The journal editors confirmed that the paper had been submitted through proper channels with appropriate peer review and had met all publication standards for scientific rigor and significance. The research methodology was sound. The data appeared authentic, and the conclusions were supported by comprehensive analysis. However, the listed authors could not be contacted, and their academic affiliations could not be verified through university records or professional directories. Dr. Janet Peterson, Toolik Field Station Director, investigated the publication by reviewing facility logs, equipment usage records, and researcher registration data for the time period described in the paper. Peterson found no evidence that the reported experiments had been conducted at the station. Laboratory equipment showed no usage corresponding to the described research methods, and no scientists had signed up for the field sites or time periods referenced in the study. It was like reading about research conducted in a parallel version of our facility, Peterson noted in her administrative report. The paper described our location accurately, referenced our equipment correctly, and used our laboratory protocols properly. But according to our records, none of the described research actually happened here. Additional anomalous publications began appearing in scientific journals throughout 1995 and 1996, all describing research conducted at Toolik Field Station, and all lacking corresponding documentation in facility records. The papers covered diverse topics including plant ecology, wildlife behavior, atmospheric chemistry, and lake ecosystem dynamics. Each study demonstrated high scientific quality and contributed valuable insights to Arctic research, yet none could be traced to actual researchers or approved projects. University of Alaska Research Administrator Dr. Robert Chen reviewed publication records and found 17 papers citing Toolik Field Station research that had no corresponding documentation in university files. The studies described experiments requiring months of field work, sophisticated equipment, and multiple researchers, yet facility logs showed no activity during the reported research periods. The publications were generating significant academic recognition and research citations despite their mysterious origins. Graduate student Michael Torres, assigned to investigate the publication anomaly as part of his thesis research, traveled to Toolik Field Station in summer 1996 to examine the sites described in the mysterious papers. Torres found that research locations referenced in the publications existed and showed evidence of scientific activity, including sampling plots, equipment installations, and data collection sites that corresponded to the described methodologies. The research sites were real, Torres documented in his field notes. I found sampling plots laid out exactly as described in the papers, with evidence of soil core collection, vegetation monitoring, and instrument installations. Someone had definitely been conducting research at these locations, but there was no record of who or when. Torres discovered that some of the research sites contained permanent monitoring equipment that did not appear in any university inventory or equipment tracking systems. The instruments were sophisticated and properly calibrated, collecting data on soil temperature, moisture, and atmospheric conditions. However, the equipment manufacturers could not be identified, and serial numbers did not correspond to any known procurement records. Dr. Sarah Wilson, a climate researcher who had worked at Toolik Field Station for 8 years, reported encountering research activities that did not correspond to approved projects during her fieldwork. Wilson described finding freshly collected soil samples, recently installed monitoring equipment, and evidence of ongoing experiments in areas where no researchers were scheduled to be working according to facility coordination logs. I'd arrive at research sites and find that someone had been there before me, conducting what looked like professional scientific work, Wilson recalled. Sample holes were properly backfilled, equipment was correctly installed, and everything followed standard research protocols. But when I checked the station logs, no one was supposed to be working in those areas. The National Science Foundation reviewed funding records for Toolik Field Station research and found that published studies citing the facility exceeded the number of approved and funded research projects by a significant margin. The discrepancy suggested that substantial research activities were being conducted without official support, funding, or oversight, yet producing high-quality scientific results that enhanced the facility's academic reputation. NSF Program Officer Dr. Lisa Park noted that Toolik Field Station was generating research publications at rates significantly higher than comparable Arctic research facilities, despite having similar funding levels and researcher allocations. The productivity levels were exceptional, almost impossibly high for the documented level of activity and resources, Park observed in her facility evaluation report. The University of Alaska commissioned an independent audit of Toolik Field Station operations in 1997, hiring external consultants to review facility management, research coordination, and publication tracking systems. The audit confirmed the existence of research publications that could not be correlated with approved projects, facility usage, or researcher assignments, but found no evidence of administrative fraud or record-keeping errors. The audit team recommended enhanced documentation procedures and improved coordination between researchers and facility administrators to ensure proper tracking of all scientific activities. However, the anomalous publications continued to appear in scientific journals throughout 1998 and 1999, consistently describing high-quality research conducted at Toolik Field Station without corresponding administrative documentation. University administrators faced a paradox. The mysterious research publications were enhancing the facility's scientific reputation and attracting additional funding from agencies impressed by Toolik's apparent productivity, yet the lack of documentation raised concerns about accountability and oversight. The publications were advancing Arctic climate science significantly, but no one could explain who was conducting the research or how it was being funded. The Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation investigated potential unauthorized research activities at Toolik Field Station in 2000, focusing on environmental permits and regulatory compliance for scientific studies. The investigation found no violations of environmental regulations, and all research sites showed evidence of proper scientific protocols and environmental protection measures, despite the lack of official documentation. The university classified the Toolik Field Station publication anomaly under research security protocols in 2001, restricting access to facility records and limiting discussion of the administrative discrepancies. Faculty and staff were advised that questions about specific research projects should be directed through official channels, and external inquiries about facility productivity were referred to university legal departments. Current operations at Toolik Field Station continue under enhanced documentation requirements designed to track all research activities and correlate them with published results. However, scientific journals continue to publish studies citing research conducted at the facility, and university administrators continue to fund operations based on the station's exceptional scientific productivity and international reputation for Arctic research excellence. Recent budget reviews show that Toolik Field Station generates more peer-reviewed publications per dollar of funding than any comparable research facility, attracting continued investment from government agencies and academic institutions. The facility's success metrics remain exceptional despite ongoing uncertainty about the source of its most significant research contributions. In a place where the most important scientific discoveries appear to be conducted by researchers who leave no trace of their existence, except for the groundbreaking knowledge they somehow managed to publish from a research station that has learned to research itself.